being 7:30. And Julie, did you want to go through the
Sure.
process?
Yes. So, welcome to tonight's Cpdc meeting of Monday, May 16th. It's a hybrid setup, so we have some people joining us on Zoom who will be on the screen, and then we have some people in the audience. And the way we have it set up, the Zoom audience should be able to see the live audience when you talk. And then you should be able to see them when they talk, and we can all see each other in this room. The typical process is that the development team will give a presentation to the Cpdc. The Cpdc will discuss and ask questions, and then the Cpdc chair will open the discussion up to public comment. If you'd like to make a comment, we ask you please to state your name and address for the record, and then if you're in the room, if you can come and stand kind of like where the, like kind of in the middle here, a little bit closer to the owl, this is called the owl. It'll pick up your audio and video for everyone who's watching. Otherwise, for people on Zoom, please remain muted unless you are called on. If you want to make a comment, you can use the raise hand feature, which is under reactions at the bottom of the Zoom screen. That's all. Thanks.
And I see that Percival is here, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, this is, the first order of business is public hearing for scenic road review, Walnut Street, milling and repaving, the town of Reading.
And you should have a legal ad to read.
Notice of a public hearing is hereby given that under section 8.2 scenic roads of the general bylaws of the town of Reading, the Community Planning and Development Commission will hold a public hearing on Monday, May 16th, 2022 at 7:30 p.m. in person in the Select Board Meeting Room at Reading Town Hall, 16 Lowell Street, Reading, Massachusetts, and by including participation through the remote and online measures below, to consider the request from the Reading Department of Public Works seeking permission to mill and repave portions of the public right-of-way known as Walnut Street from Hopkins Street to South Street. And then there's the Zoom location information. If you would like more information or have any questions, comments, or difficulty accessing the meeting, please email Andrew McNichol, staff planner, at amcnichol@ci.reading.ma.us.
And I think you're on.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, indeed.
All right, thank you. So this is really straightforward and pretty easy. We normally don't have easy ones in front of you, so we're going to be milling part of Walnut Street from Hopkins Street down to South Street. That was what was in the public hearing. I think what we'll have in the budget for is to get to Curtis Street. But what we wanted to do was have it at least go all the way down to South Street for the hearing. So if we did have extra money in the budget, then we could go extend that down to South Street and pave all of Walnut Street. So like I said, it's very straightforward. We go out there with a milling machine. We mill about 1.5 inches to 2 inches of asphalt, and we put back exactly 1.5 inches to 2 inches of asphalt back in place. And that is all that we're doing outside of adjusting structures. Potentially adjusting structures when we have to go out there when we have the mill. Sometimes we have to adjust a structure or two when we go ahead and do that work. Other than that, nothing's changing to the roadway, just repaving it. So no changes to trees, walls, sidewalks. There are no sidewalks out there or any portion of the tree lawn area. That's pretty much it. We're looking to do the work this summer. Highway Department will be doing the paving work, and our annual paving contractor will be doing the milling work. Is there any questions?
So which corner of South? Is it the first corner of South or the second corner of South?
The first corner of South. I don't think we'll be able to get down that far anyway. I think limited budgets will most likely get us to Curtis, but we're going to be hopeful to try to stretch it as far as we can down that portion.
Through that intersection or before it? So
probably to include that intersection.
okay, that's.
Well, we can stop before it too. It doesn't matter. I think that might be labeled incorrectly. I think won't.
It's actually Walnut Street from where the cursor is down.
Yeah, right,
down.
and then Walnut Street down to Walnut Street Extension.
Yeah.
It would be to that first intersection with South Street.
How many days are you expecting this process to take?
That's a tricky question. It could be, anywhere between a day or two just to mill, and depending on how the weather is and how the schedule lines up, there could be some delay in between the two. We don't like to have too long of a delay, but that can happen. And then probably a day or two to pave. So altogether, if everything goes well and the pavers are right behind the millers, you're looking at maybe 2 weeks tops.
That's a crazy dangerous right-hand turn heading onto South Street. And there's a lot of children, pedestrian traffic with no sidewalks trying to get to the park. So 2 weeks is a long time. Make sure that all of those precautions are in place, please.
When we go ahead and we mill, the roadway will be intact, so you'll have asphalt, a portion of the asphalt still remaining, the binder course. And so there'll only be a lip at the end, and then we can address that lip for the period of time with temporary asphalt, so it ramps up. And then any sort of, during construction work, we'll have a few details out there.
Yeah, I think
And we always work with the police department on having details in place.
you may want to have some details right before you start to start slowing down the traffic, because the eastbound traffic's pretty fast coming around that corner.
Yeah, we may be able to, instead of having details, because they're very costly just to use them for something like a traffic calming, we could probably just put out like a message board or two just to let them know for advanced construction work so everyone can get aware of it. We also send out notification, hand delivered notification, and we also send out a code red, prior to work, just to allow everyone in the general area to know what's going on.
Okay. Thank you.
Questions from the audience? Yes, Jonathan, please.
Yes, please. What did you call this?
It's the owl.
The owl.
If you look at the other side, it looks very much like an owl.
Good evening, everybody. And good evening, Ryan, wherever you are. Jonathan Barnes. I'm here primarily in my capacity of being on the Historical Commission. And thank you for giving me the opportunity. I don't have any issues with it. As I understand, it's not affecting any of the those aspects of the area that comprise what are usually the factors designating a scenic road, walls or trees or scenic views. But I would like to ask, my understanding is that there are no curbs or anything on Walnut Street. Is that correct, Ryan?
That's correct.
Okay.
Not at that intersection though. So the northwestbound side of that intersection has a curb, granite curb, and so does the I think the corner, the big round corner. Yeah, so there's some curbing there.
But the rest of the road, thank you, but the rest of the road does not have curbing and I take it it will not or won't have any asphalt berm or anything?
No, per the regulations of the scenic way, we're not proposing to put any granite curb or asphalt berm to change that and alter that aspect of the scenic way. So we're just really milling what's there and putting back exactly the same thickness.
Okay, thank you. And the same width, I take it. It's not going to be any additional width?
No, what is exactly there will be what is exactly going back.
Okay, great, thank you. And I don't, as I said, I don't have any other comments or concerns other than one about the process. Because the scenic road bylaw, not the bylaw, sorry, scenic road regulations, which are the Cpdc regulations, in addition to requiring that notification at the time that a roadway is being requested for designation as a scenic road, it's required that the Historical Commission, I believe the Conservation Commission, be notified. But more importantly, and more apropos here, at the time that any work is being done or requested to be being done, the regulations say that a notice will be published and shall also contain, strike that, sorry about that. The date, the time, the place, and purpose of the hearing, and shall also contain a reasonable description of the activity proposed by the applicant. And more importantly, copies of this notice shall also be provided to the Board of Selectmen, the Conservation Commission, and the Historical Commission. This, I believe, is the second time that there has been a scenic road request. And I don't believe in that case, or in this case, the notification was provided to the Historical Commission. We found out about it, and I did have a conversation with Andrew during the process, but my point is that I just want to impress upon the CPDC that the regulations require that the Historical Commission be notified, and just appreciate it if that notification can be formally provided to the Historical Commission rather than an informal process to a particular member. And I'd also like to request, particularly the engineering department, it's not that critical in this particular case, but in these instances, it would be helpful if the Historical Commission, I'm sure everybody, could be provided with some more detail about what's intended with respect to the work being done. And in this case, I didn't really, other than knowing that it was the request was for milling and pavement, which is very broad, we didn't really know anything until this evening. So it'd just be helpful if we could get some more information in advance so we could be at least more knowledgeable and prepared. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
On that note, however, I think right, we didn't get any detail until right now either. So right, Historical Commission isn't being treated any other way than any other board. So,
And I would revise my request that even the CPDC should be given more notification. And in this particular case, no harm, no foul, but if it were a different situation, it would be much more helpful if we, and more importantly you, received enough information in advance.
That's true, but isn't milling by its nature just staying within the confines of the road?
Yeah.
You basically scrape it down and repave it.
Do you remember which member got the notice? Did you send it to the chair, Sam?
I was the one, I have no idea about Sam. We had a meeting the other day, and I brought it up at the meeting because I had a conversation with Andrew as a result of an email informing me. I raised it at the Historical Commission meeting. She did not indicate, she was there, she did not indicate that she got that notification. If she did, then I apologize.
How would you like us to send it to you in the future?
Through it can go to the chair, it could go through the RHC
I
forwarding.
thought it went through the forwarding account, but that is something I can make sure of next time.
That would be helpful. I mean, it's not uncommon, as I'm sure you folks have experienced, that things can get passed if there was an email. But if it did go to the forwarding address, that would be more helpful because then the 7 or 8 of us would actually be aware.
Most definitely.
Are you suggesting that it was sent, that the notice was sent?
I had thought so.
I mean, I do know, after you and I talked, I do know
And
that then the notice
right.
was sent, right?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
My name's Jennifer Harden. I live at 55 Walnut Street. First, thank you for paving the street. It desperately needs it. I've noticed this for a while. It's been in pretty rough shape. My question is, just so I understand, are you starting at Hopkins and you're coming down to Curtis? Is that the first phase 1?
That's correct. We're starting from Hopkins and proceeding down as far as we can go. Hopefully we can go past Curtis, but Curtis is just about where our budget runs out right about now, so.
And then how soon after that, assuming you run out of money at Curtis Street, how soon will you be paving the rest of the street?
This comes out of a separate account, the town skin coating account through DPW Highway. So I'll have to talk to them and see if it's something that they can extend the next year. that's why we're hoping to get as far as we can on this first stretch. That's why we put it out in the notification to South Street, just to make sure that the request was as encompassing as we possibly could get with the budget and the limits of work that potentially we could get to.
So the budget is year to year, is that correct?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Is the budget year to year?
It goes, fiscal year goes from July 1st to June 30th. So we're in that fiscal year now. So this money, we get
Yeah.
new money in July.
Yeah. The only reason is I'm bringing this up is because it's a busy road, it's well traveled. And I did notice that Prospect Street was paved in its entirety last year when it didn't necessarily need it as badly, in my opinion. So I'm just wondering, you know, if Walnut Street was taken into consideration when that was done.
I guess I'm not following the question because it's on the list to be paved. We're paving it.
Right.
So if it was considered, there's multiple factors that go into our paving program and the road program in general. There's an algorithm and a program that goes through and grades all the roads on a PCI grade, which is basically a number grade, and it takes into a multitude of different criteria on how it ranks those. It does a great job. It's a tool. It's not the best, so there is some subjectivity in that, and it's highly based on volume counts as well. So you'll have certain roads pop up sooner than other roads. You brought up Prospect Street. Prospect Street was ripped up in its entirety for a gas main relay, so that jumped up on the list higher. We know Walnut Street needs some attention, so that's why we're here. We're hoping to get, the whole stretch that we're talking about. So that's why we're here, to try to get that paved.
And I'm sorry, I'll make my question more clear. Is it possible that half the street would be done and then the other half would never be done, or would be done, 2 years later, or?
I think our intent is to get out there and do as much as we can. We do have a project that hasn't started yet. It is under contract at Sturgis Park. It's a sewer pump station that is going to require some work and some work in that stretch of Walnut Street, which is labeled South Street on this map. And so we would be stopping there anyway at this point, and then potentially moving forward. And then we'd have to look at the budget again for next year, Chapter 90, and then also run through the program again for the capital plan. So we'll hope to try to get through. I think we'll be able to stretch it a little bit further than Curtis, but we don't know yet.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
But thank you.
Any other comments or questions relative to the milling and paving?
Alright, so can I move to approve the scenic road decision for the Walnut Street Mill and Overlay project?
Second.
Okay, and can we have a show of hands or
All in favor?
all in favor?
Wait, before we vote, right, just to be clear on what's in
Yeah, come on, we'll make a decision.
what's in the decision, the findings are, right, pretty much everything that we just talked about here about what the project is. Coordination of public safety, no sidewalks, tree lawns, all that sort of thing. The condition here is about accidental damage. It says in the case that any existing tree and or stone wall is damaged during the milling and overlay work, such shall be restored to its condition prior to construction. So I'm down with that.
Me too.
Good. We're good?
Second and vote.
You have a second?
I second it.
All in favor? Good, it's passed.
Are we all, is this it?
This is it.
You're all
Wow.
down.
Okay,
Thanks, John.
thank you. The next item on the list is sign permit application for half and half Cafe, 607 Main Street. Do we have a representative here or on the line? Do we-
Sean, are you on?
You are.
That was right. I'm not seeing him on the line. We had a phone number that had left earlier.
Well, we don't have to have an applicant.
Half.
Fun.
But oftentimes it's better.
Right.
So maybe we can not take this up now and take it a little bit later and see if,
Yeah, I
Is
can
that
also
acceptable?
shoot him in
You
another
could do
email.
the chiropractor one first, right? Because
Yes.
it's already 7:50. And then if he joins, we can take him off after. It's the chiropractor.
Yes.
Is he online? So we will go ahead and take up the matter of the village chiropractor at 484 Main Street, signed permit application. Not here either?
No, she is here.
Okay,
Oh, I'm here.
there you
Can you hear me?
go.
Yeah.
Yes,
Hi.
go ahead.
Sorry,
Oh.
1 second.
I'm sorry. Are you waiting for me?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me okay? I am applying for a vinyl awning at 484 Main Street. It's gonna replace an existing awning from a realty group that's there now.
So do you have the before image?
I don't.
This is what exists today.
Oh,
That's what exists
Andrew
today.
does.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead and give your presentation, please.
Oh, I'm doing a presentation. I didn't realize it was a pop quiz, sorry.
Just talk about what the
Basically, I
request
am-
is.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just tell us what your request is.
I'm requesting to replace the existing awning at 44 Main Street with a black vinyl awning with my logo and my phone number on the front of it. Just like depicted from William Blanchard. They're gonna do the awning if it's approved.
So because of the logo size, a sign permit was required. Not all awnings require sign permits, but the logo exceeded minimum thresholds. So we do have those dimensions. The label is in the draft certificate as well, and an email is included in the drive detailing some of those dimensions.
And the math works out. When you say vinyl, is it a shiny vinyl or is it more like a canvas vinyl?
That's a really good question. I don't have the answer for that,
No?
but I can find out from Blanchard tomorrow.
Did you pick the color and material you wanted?
Well, I went through it with Diane from Blanchard, and she told me that the vinyl that they recommended, which would be the best one for that area. So I'm assuming, I can't assume, I make no assumption.
What about that wall sign? Is that gonna stay?
That has been removed. I believe DiNapoli has his sign right below it. And right now I don't have a plan to put a sign to replace it.
And there's no lighting, right? No,
There is no lighting, no.
we changed the permit form.
Recently with the new website and OpenGov, it's become fillable and so on.
Learning where to look again.
Okay.
You know, something that I thought about when we did the last awning sign that was actually curved. We always do this sort of projected dimension, right? That's really, you know, that's going to be longer than. So what do we care about? We just care about the projected dimension. Like if you take a picture of it, make it flat, doesn't matter whether it's curving up. Just don't get caught up in that because that's longer than that.
I get what you're saying.
So if you did the math, it might not work. Right? I mean, I don't have any objections to this particular sign.
I don't have any other comments or questions from the audience?
I don't have any objections, so I will move that we approve the sign permit application for 484 Main Street, Village Chiropractor.
Is there a
Thank
second?
you.
I think it's a certificate of appropriateness.
Certificate of appropriateness, thank you.
Why is this B?
Yes, it is, I had the wrong document, but it was, yeah. So I'm moving that we approve the certificate of
This
appropriateness.
is B? Confused about that boundary. Oh, yeah, a second, sorry.
Okay,
I'm thinking of one block over. Okay.
All in favor? Good. It's a go for you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Let's see.
It's not
No. Still not. No, at least they didn't answer it.
Okay.
You guys wanna go back and do the sign permit without a project opponent or?
What I saw was clashing in color.
Well, that might just be the rendering, I would think.
Correct.
I don't think they're
I
replacing
just
something.
needed a verification.
We could certainly state that though. Does it say it's a new awning? So I designed that addition a million years ago and I hated the fact that they put awnings. We did all this elaborate like panel and trim work and stuff. It's dull.
Okay, so should we go back to the half and half? There's no representative to present.
You're already talking about it, so.
yeah, so should we just pick this up again right here?
So again, awning where the logo itself triggers a sign permit, but they were able to fit some of the text in the by right portions of 4 by 36 inches. So it's the logo itself that requires a sign permit, but they've met all the other additional requirements.
It looks okay to me, except for I think we should put a condition on that the background is the same color as the awning. It
Yes.
doesn't clash.
Yes.
And now, Nick, I'm seeing at the side of the awning all the detail work that's probably under
Yeah,
there
just-
too.
Okay.
I mean, if you look at the picture right now, Edward Jones was newer than the original Fusion, which was something else before that.
Oh, it was.
So that was older and it's probably faded more. Possible that the new one we brought up to the Edward Jones color.
Or to have the new awning
Oh, so that
entirely
they're
match the
all-
Edward
Yeah,
Jones
if
color?
you, I mean, the current street view, they're mostly the same from Zuka all the way over to Edward Jones, and the Fusion one is the faded one.
Right.
So I guess I would somehow condition it that if the intent is for them to be the same color, then they should be the same color.
Okay.
So not just the background that was flashing on the rendering, but actually, yeah,
Yeah,
I see what you're saying, I see it from up there.
Uniform.
because it just looks
Say
faded.
say that again.
If the intent is for all of the awnings to be the same color,
Yeah.
then they should, I don't know, provide you with a sample that shows that it's the same color. Because if they're gonna put one in that's slightly off again, then it'll just look faded. If they were all different colors, if every awning was a different color
Yeah.
for each
Yep.
each business, then you could understand, okay, there's
Okay,
variety in the whole
yeah.
thing, it doesn't matter.
And what we don't know is whether it's being replaced in full.
So how do we know what the intent is? Like, is there a master
Says
signage
it says
plan?
it's $2,000, right? So they're not applying a logo for $2,000. Because the Fusion logo is longer than the half and half logo.
Do you think they're getting
I
them?
think a patch is $2,000. Seems kind of high.
No, but remember, wasn't it the nail salon that tried to like not replace it? Right, they just took off the letters and put on new letters
Which nails?
along, right?
One on the end.
The one on the end?
Nails?
That didn't go so well?
How
I
do
thought you were
remember
here for that. Were you?
I don't remember that, but that doesn't mean I. Memory's not what it used to be. Like, how long ago was that?
I thought you were here for
More than
that,
7
but-
years ago?
It might have been.
Okay.
Oh, I should,
Don't you remember that, Nick? Yeah?
barely.
It
I
was-
don't remember what I ate this morning.
I think maybe that was Jean's.
So the sign permit fee. Oh, never mind, I'm sorry.
So can we stipulate that they replace this awning? We
We
can't,
can't make them replace it, I don't think.
okay?
It's just unclear what they're doing.
Without an applicant, we talk to.
Come and ask.
Yep.
And ask them.
Do we wanna?
When's our next meeting? You
I
also
know, right,
hate
after
to,
a
Well,
whole
how about we look at what they're proposing and agree or disagree with the appropriateness of it,
Yeah.
and then let them deal with staff just administratively. So they can come back with more information for you, you can make a decision based on that. If it looks
Yeah.
like what they're
Yeah.
proposing here, then
Well, and here in the findings for the draft certificate of appropriateness, it says the proposed awning shall be constructed of vinyl fabric that is maroon in color. That's kind of implying that they're proposing to build a whole new awning, and I'm wondering if we should just, if we don't actually know if they're going to be doing a whole new awning, should we say if it is a new awning, it'll be constructed of a vinyl fabric that matches the color of the adjoining awning? There, like that.
Doesn't say, but it indicates dimensions of such.
I mean, it's the proposed awning, so all of this is. Yeah, I'm guessing it's the whole thing.
our finding is that, and I don't know if this is based on a conversation Julie and Andrew had with the applicant is seeking to install an awning. Or is the applicant proposing to just install labeling on the awning?
I think that's fair to assume in this, and if they're not gonna do that, then this certificate isn't out.
Right. Because the certificate is
Yes.
assuming that they are installing a new one.
This also says vinyl fabric. I wonder if that's just a generic term for some polyplan.
I was kind of wondering, I also the last what the vinyl material was.
See, where the other one, on the vinyl issue, the other one didn't, right, the bottom edge was an edge, right, along the frame. Right, but this, at least the adjacent ones all have like a little,
Skull.
yeah, below it, which you couldn't do with,
Certainly not with the thin sheeting.
right, yeah.
Okay. So do we have a motion to accept?
Sure, if we're ready, I can move to approve the certificate of appropriateness. Sure, that's a good idea.
We don't know if there's anybody
Just
online.
make sure, just
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the audience here or from Zoom relative to this signage? Yes, ma'am.
I think Jackie McCarthy's on.
Jackie and Carlo are in the Zoom.
Okay.
I'm not sure that condition gets to it,
Yeah.
right, because I think that needs to be, I think we need to have a finding that says, the awning will be replaced with a color, with, using a fabric color that matches,
And that the logo.
the others, right? Cause that's what we're making this certificate based on. Right, and if that finding isn't correct.
There are only 2 colors, is that correct? Because I'm seeing 3 right now.
I don't know, but
Right.
Well, when they patched their logo on top,
Oh,
it's
I
a
think-
different color.
yeah, I think
So,
that's just some bad photoshopping,
Rendering, yeah.
Okay.
or quick photoshopping, I should say.
Okay, we all set?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
I think
that
that works
works.
better.
So then what was the first condition? We got rid of it, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's then, I'll move to approve the certificate of appropriateness for 607 Main Street, for signage at 607 Main Street as amended this evening.
I'll second.
All in favor? Unanimous.
Okay, do you mind pausing just for a minute so I can try to get into the Zoom room so I can help
Yes, of
Okay,
course.
I don't know why, thought I turned all my sound off, but didn't work, so
If you go
I
down
did,
here,
that's
turn
what I
that
did.
off.
Didn't work. It's just easier if we're both managing. Oh, we turned it back on, that's why. Okay. So,
Oh, there you are.
so it kept it off, okay. I had to turn it back off. Okay,
Okay.
great, thank you.
Back on?
I'm just gonna open the door real quick since it's.
Thank you. And we're a little bit behind time, but we would like to address the matter of the 40R plan review for 459 Main Street, GC Federa Contracting, Inc.
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair. My name for the record is Attorney Jesse Schomer. I represent the applicant on this matter. With me here tonight, Commissioners, is Jeffrey Ollinger of Ollinger Architects. We were prepared to review the draft decision that we received from town planning staff since the previous hearing, and Jeffrey is available to confirm a number of the questions and comments that Andrew had with respect to the project metrics as it's currently proposed. But just to provide a brief recap from the previous hearing, we were last before the commission back on April 11th. And as you'll recall, the primary topics of discussion at that hearing were the revised layout and design of the upper floors of this project to provide increased setbacks at the fourth floor, to reduce the visual impact of the project to residential neighbors to the rear of the project site, as well as a revised detail for the ground floor garage wall as it faced the the mixed business residential district behind this property. There was also some fair amount of discussion regarding the treatment of this site as a transitional area, and as we discussed at that hearing, we're in agreement that the project does fall into the definition of a transitional area, and for the reasons that we discussed at the last meeting, we believe that the project as designed complies with the guidelines of that, the transitional area. In addition to that, there were a number of questions and feedback from neighbors, and I see the Johnson family are in the audience tonight, so if they have additional questions, we look forward to going through those. We did receive a page of questions that they had and comments, and I believe the answers to those are for the most part provided in the plans that were previously submitted, but we're happy to go through those if they'd like further clarification on some of those points. With respect to updates for the project since last we were before you, there was a question that was raised at the last hearing and a request of us that we take a look at the proposed new zoning for the DSGD, which I understand was just passed by town meeting recently. I believe we are in agreement with town council, and I won't speak for her because I see she's on the line tonight. But I believe we're in agreement that the zoning that was in effect at the time of this application is the applicable zoning to this project. It was important for us to clarify that point because we did take a look at the updated zoning that was just passed. And to be perfectly candid, the amended zoning would basically kill the project as it was proposed. It couldn't go forward for a number of reasons, including dimensional requirements, additional setbacks, parking requirements, and fiscally, it would not have been financially feasible for based on the additional affordability requirements that would have been applicable to this project. So we did review it. We would have liked to have been able to comply with the amended zoning. We understand that that's the spirit and that's the intent of the voters of Reading at the moment. But as I'm sure the members will understand, projects like this are designed months, if not years in advance of when they're actually proposed. So it's important to us to be able to go forward with respect to the zoning that was in effect when we did apply. So I believe that's confirmed now. In addition to that, as I mentioned, we did receive a draft decision, and if the members would like to go through that tonight, we're happy to do that with you and provide any clarification on the points that were raised, as well as answer any questions from neighbors. But I believe that's the latest from us, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board relative to these issues?
So just to be clear, we don't have any additional information from you since our last meeting?
Correct. Yeah, we're comfortable with the plans as we propose them. We'd like to go forward as it's currently designed. We believe that, as I mentioned, it complies with the transitional standards. So we did not file any additional documents documenting changes. We'd like to move forward as it's proposed.
Yes.
I recall a couple of other things coming up. One was, I believe that there was a request for, I'm not exactly sure what it's called, but the type of shadow study where we could see a little bit more detail of what's there prior, I think it was what's there prior to the site, prior to the proposed development, and what might be afterwards. So I was anticipating receiving that. And I also kind of remember somebody, I can't remember if it was a Cpdc member or a member of the public, bringing up an issue with the length of the wall. And if you look at our design guidelines at 10.4.4, this is the wall abutting the residential home. 10.4.4 of our design guidelines are that buildings shall be no greater than 80 feet in length without a physical or material break to allow for light and views. And by the last plans you gave us, it looked like it's more than 80 feet. So perhaps you'd like to address that now, but we don't have any additional new information. I guess I would acknowledge that. Those are two other things that I recall being brought up.
Yeah, I'll defer to Jeffrey if he wants to go into the design of that wall further, Ms. Klisch. But I believe the intent of the design of the project was to focus on providing the design treatment to break up the massing of the building, as you mentioned in that section, not more than 80 feet, through material and articulations in the building rather than physical breaks. And so the project was designed with horizontal and vertical articulations and design elements that broke up the appearance of a solid wall. Now, in terms of the ground floor garage wall, that was, we had proposed at the last hearing that be designed as a green wall, and we're certainly open to suggestions from the commissioners if you'd like to see additional changes or material changes to break that up, perhaps sections of green and sections of masonry. But that's, as I said, the design changes to break up the massing, we primarily focused on those upper floors because really we believe those are the primary concern to the neighbors, and I won't speak for them. I'll let them speak for themselves, but that was certainly our intent in the design of the project, with breaking up that massing.
Okay, I guess I'm getting a little bit confused. I am thinking about the ground floor wall, and my recollection was that at our last meeting, the design we were shown was not a green wall, but a concrete wall of sorts. So I'm guessing I'm getting a little confused about what you're proposing.
Jeff, would you mind jumping on and clarifying?
Happy to.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, members of the board. Thank you for hearing our project again. So Heather is correct that it was actually a CMU block or a masonry wall was what we were proposing last presentation. That was largely due to maintenance concerns for maintaining the green wall along the neighbor's lot line. That being said, we presented, albeit not apparently convincing, but a range of potential options for the treatment of that wall. We could introduce more variation of color in the wall. We're open to really making that a pleasant thing to look at. And then Heather, towards your question on the 80-foot length, the overall length of the wall, as I measured in our drawing, is 84 feet. So it's 4 feet over. And that also includes the bike parking and the solar cell storage area. So for our purposes, it would be perfectly fine if we stopped the wall short and made it a different material at the bike parking, in which case it would become 74 feet long and compliant.
Okay, this is my last comment here, and then I may need to leave it and let others comment, but specifically that guideline calls for a material break for light and views, and I guess I'm not seeing the light or views coming through in the way you're treating that wall.
Okay, my question in terms of, I guess, the view that you would be able to generate through our building, I guess, is that, that's unclear in terms of what they mean by views. I guess I could understand that different context, but in terms of transparency or other types of treatment to that wall, we're happy to work with the abutters on that, the Johnsons on that question. And we can treat a portion of that wall, or even, as I mentioned, change the material entirely at the bike parking area. Or we also have a utility area that we could just simply shorten the wall by removing that utility area, or moving that utility area to where the bike parking is. So we have some flexibility in how we can treat that wall, and it's just 4 feet beyond what the regulation is currently as it's designed.
What would you do at the bike parking? I don't understand what you mean by an opportunity there.
We could make it transparent fence.
That just seems like a privacy issue, really. Right.
Or we could make the utility area, a different material. That's also fine. It's, again, the wall itself as it's drawn is 84 feet long, so it's right near the threshold.
Yeah, but let's not let the code minimums become our design maximums if there's a better solution, right?
Yeah, that's understood.
I mean, potentially you could make both ends of the wall something different, like the
Very
bike
true.
part and the other part.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, my preference is to make this thing something that's beautiful to look at and that the Johnsons will like. And so for that reason, I'm willing to invest more design time into the development of that surface so that it, meets with the friendly appearance to the neighbors.
I guess I'm sorry, I thought that's exactly what we were talking about last time, so I'm surprised to see that they coming to us this time.
I think to bring this conversation to more of a conclusion, perhaps we could leave it at, we're certainly willing to accept conditions to break up the appearance of that wall. We really just need to know what the members would like to see. We'll certainly show it on updated plans.
Do you have?
Wait, we're designing your
Yeah.
building for you?
Thank you, I was a bit very confused by this.
I'll design it. You want to take my word?
No, I'm not suggesting that you design it, but I think there's been some suggestions made by Jeff, and we're certainly willing to open to any of them, and so we're just looking for guidance from you. But if you prefer that we come back with a revised plan and make the decision ourselves, we're certainly willing to do that.
guess I'm not sitting here prepared to design it for you, maybe others at the table are. But this is, again, one of the items that I was hoping you'd bring back to us this week.
So are they willing, I thought I just heard him say they're willing to come back with new plans? Can we just get some clarity around that? Cause we don't have that yet.
Yeah, I guess
Right.
we don't have that yet.
Yeah, if there are additional plans that are needed to bring this hearing to a conclusion, then we're certainly willing to do that, yes.
So we're really focused on this one part of the entire project where there might be issues elsewhere too. We can certainly give them a little more guidance on what this might be in case the rest of it is acceptable somehow.
Yeah.
So when you look at that rendering on the right, that three-dimensional rendering on the right side, there's nothing that talks to the upper floors with that bottom wall, right? You don't have the same module, you don't have the same rhythm or spacing. Maybe that would be more interesting than just the entire blank wall. Even if it was green, maybe there's a trellis section every bay, you know, so that something different can grow instead of just some ivy. And so that starts to break the wall down. I don't think we should just say, okay, here it's 84 feet long, we'll make a 4-foot section different in the middle, and then that really solves it, because it doesn't. I think it's really the mass of the wall, regardless of whether it's 9 feet of green material or something more interesting I think would be appropriate there. Maybe there could be breaks in it where there's some, some of the more decorative CMU materials between the green, so it's not just a massive wall of green. It may go yellow at times or whatever. We will want to hear from the abutters, of course, what they're thinking there. So that's what I think has to happen to this bottom piece. And we're talking about a coated metal, right? We're not talking about real copper here, are we?
Correct, it would be a metal panel.
Okay, because otherwise I think the copper is probably going to kill everything and stain whatever wall is left. Yeah. Plus, I think if you do a copper roof, you have to get some kind of a DEP permit, right, for the runoff on that? A completely different animal.
I'm also thinking about it, I know we're focusing so much on the wall, and there may be other parts of the element of the project, but I'm also thinking about this, if it's a green wall,
Or portions are green wall broken up the way Nick was just describing. Is all the greenness or all the plants still contained on 459 Main Street's property? Or are you building in an assumption that something is then going to be growing in and then encroaching on the neighbor's property? I mean, I know we're just talking about feet here, but
Yeah,
I would
so
say
I
in
think you
concept,
hit the nail on the head.
contained on your property.
Which is where we kind of arrived at. You know, initially we had developed a very, nice section that allowed for a planter to run along the top of the wall, and then with potentially hanging plants or something along those lines. But you're right, in general, there's a question of maintenance that comes into it. And so, how that's maintained and who's responsible for maintaining that and how it's accessed all become pretty significant questions. And so that's where we kind of arrived at, a more durable approach would be to do something within the architecture that could address it. But again, I think that there were several other pieces to this project that we were also trying to tie down. And so this one piece, we feel very much can be, developed. And we just want to be, I think, more confident that what we're leading with is acceptable in terms of the concept of what that wall, the approach to that design would be.
So I think there's the design, and then you bring up good questions about, so how will it be accessed for maintenance? It'll need to be maintained one way or the other over time, right? So this all needs to be baked into, I don't know if it then, you're not leaving any space for a fence, for any sort of screening. It can be screened in various ways, but it shouldn't require maintenance or anything that encroaches on the abutter's property is what I'm saying. So
Right.
if that means you need to pull it back a little bit, that
Yeah, but
maybe, I don't know.
You're right, but the only way for them to have access to it without ever asking permission to go onto the abutter's property is for it to go back 3-4 feet.
Yeah.
Not 1 foot, not just the 1 foot planting strip, it's,
Right.
so that's, what does that do to the plan? Does the parking still fit?
I mean, we in theory would be able to rework a project, but it would have a much diminished ground floor retail. You know, yeah, so I think it would be detrimental to the overall ground floor plan in the extreme if we were to move that entire wall over by 5 feet.
I'm just trying to find the plans.
Let's put a pin in that because I think there's probably some other issues with the ground floor that may that you may want to wrap that thought into.
And just, I think that's fine, and I'll kind of end my comments on that now. What I'm running from are what I had heard from the abutters at the end of our meeting last time.
And I just may also add one, which is part of any flexibility in that plan would potentially be gained by a waiver for the drive aisle width to bring it down to something that's more of a one directional width. That would actually allow us to slide that wall back without harming the without harming the retail.
I'm gonna say, there isn't much retail. I don't think a foot out of the retail makes much of a difference. But maybe a foot out of the aisle and a foot and a half out of the retail or something like that starts to make a difference. And now that wall's moving 3 feet away, and so there's less impact to the abutters, and it's maintainable.
You would also probably lose a parking space.
Yeah, maybe.
Unless we can figure out something, again, with the drive aisle width, where that loading zone is, you could potentially fit another parking space in there.
I mean, if you look at the,
you know, but again, there's a drive aisle question.
it's different than this. No, that plan's different than the presentation plan.
Do we have any other comments or questions?
Yeah, so,
John?
as you all know, I was on the park committee, and lots of discussion about parking, and that also ties into, I wasn't here the last meeting, but I did view it, and in relation, not to this project, but another project, I know there was a lot of discussion about compact spaces and the size of compact spaces. My take from being on the park committee and my take from the issues of that other development is that, you know, a 7.5 foot wide compact space is not really functional, especially if we're narrowing the drive width. But I think just in general, a 7.5 foot wide compact space is not something that I'm interested in approving. So I guess I think that whole stretch on the eastern side, right, all of those or most of those, I can't see it from here. I should put my glasses on, but
They're just only 5.
Right, but so there's a couple of feet there, right? There's 2.5 feet. If you went to a more standard 8 foot compact space. But I'm gonna go even further back to, you know, comments that I've brought up at every one of our meetings. My concern here on this particular project is really the location. It's in a very unique location that's not comparable to anywhere else in Reading, because it is on the, I dare someone, tell me that this isn't the busiest intersection in town, and with no access from a side or a back back road. And so therefore, right, we've talked about this a lot. How do you circulate? How do you, how does all this work? And I think that you're getting there. I think this, the plan that Andrew has up on here is starting to work, but I'm really still concerned about the number of parking spaces that are in there, that are being driven by the density, the number of units that you have, right? So, and my concern is putting everything I just said together is that, in this particular location, there is no potential for on-street parking. There's, even for the retail, there's no on-street parking now. I know that you cordoned off some of the spaces in the building for associated with the retail, but one of them is employee and the other one is something else.
Blow that up?
One of them's accessible.
Yeah, an ADA space. So those are really not for customer parking, and then you have very little visitor parking, which if there's anything that I heard in the park committee is that that's a big concern and an issue. And here I'm going to say even more so because you don't have that nearby parking. Any nearby on-street parking is across what is a
4 lanes.
a tough intersection to get across. And so I think that my concern here, right, is that your density is right. You're providing the required parking, although I'm not so sure that if you take out the visitor space, right? In our regulations, we say you have to have 1.25 visitor parking. If it's designated, doesn't necessarily need to count into that. We can require additional visitor parking, and then on top of it, you really don't have anything for the retail space, which you're not required to. So even though the math might work, I'm not convinced that the parking functionally will work for the density that's provided on the site. Add that to your comment just a minute ago that if you change that thing, the wall, then you're going to lose a space, and then we also need to change it from 7.5 foot spaces to 8 foot spaces. There you lose a couple of feet there. There's still a lot being pushed into this space. That's my concern.
Lieutenant Chris Jones did raise
I guess
his
I
hand
get
on
a
this
quick
issue.
point about that, and I appreciate everything you said there, John. I'd like just to remind, we're proposing 12 units right now, which would require us to have 15 parking spaces. And right now we're providing 19 parking spaces.
So, right, 3 of them are ADA, one's for a retail manager, and then you had 1 or 2 for visitor, right? And that gets you, I think, back down to 12 for actual, ones that you could lease out. Maybe I have my math wrong a little bit there, but not far.
Yep. My understanding is that the ADA spaces are included in the residential count.
Yeah.
And that if we had an issue with the width of the spaces, we could very easily lose one space and make all the compact spaces 8 feet. And we would still be over the number that would be required.
The first page 4 of that presentation has the parking counts.
Right, which page did you say, 4?
So those 17, that's, of the 17, one's ADA van, one's ADA 5 are compact and 2 are visitor, is that what you're saying? I'm having a hard time following that table.
Actually no, that's of the one is van, and then we can have 2 that are visitors, and I believe that 2 ADA should just be a 1. That's a typo. We have 1 ADA van and 1 ADA regular space for the retail. For the residential. And for the retail, we have 1 ADA and 1 manager.
Yeah, I guess I still don't think that, right, because of I still think that there's an issue there about the access and the functionality of how it works, regardless of whether, right, because you've got the retail that's not gonna function very well because there's no parking there, no parking for them. And then, right, if we require visitor spaces, that's eating into your 1.25 or your additional that you're having there.
I think to that point, Mr. Weston, we've said this before in previous hearings, and I hate to harp on it, but I'll say it again. This project, I agree with you, it's in a very unique location in terms of the access to the site, but it's also in an extremely unique location in terms of its proximity to public transport. And this kind of project, and this zoning district in particular, the point of it is transit-oriented development, non-auto dependent uses, and residents who, the marketing of this project will be to residents who don't want to drive to the store. They want a store that's within walking distance. And it's the same that's true down the street at the Rise and other projects in this district. The commercial uses are of course available to anyone, but they primarily target people who fit that demographic, who are going to get on the T, go to work, come back and stop at the store on their way up to their apartment. In terms of the access to the site, and there's been some comments about how vehicles will exit the site given the busyness of this intersection. We certainly recognize it's a heavy traffic intersection, but as has been demonstrated through our traffic report and testified to by our traffic engineer, this project itself is an extremely low generator project for the number of units and the size of the commercial space. So this site itself will be very little in terms of the contribution to that situation. It's an existing condition. We recognize that, and we're certainly willing to work with engineering and DPW to make it better. And if they'll allow us to have a striped box to prevent conflicts with vehicles exiting the site, we're certainly willing to do that.
So if I can, respond for a second, right? You have to realize that you keep saying about the transit-oriented development, the entire downtown smart growth district, the regulations were put in place because every single property within the downtown smart growth district is close to transit. That's how we got to the 1.25. So and actually, if you want to really talk about it, this one's probably further away than any other site within the downtown smart growth district. So you're absolutely right. The whole reason why this district is in existence is because of the transit, but the regulations were put in with that knowledge that that there was a potential for that increased transit usage. So you don't get points here, right? Because you're near transit, because the entire district, we thought about that for the entire district. I'll also say that I completely am on board with the fact that this is not going to generate much traffic. I don't think anyone on this board has ever disputed that fact, that this isn't going to generate a whole lot of traffic. I think the issue here is that the traffic, that when that traffic does come in and come out, it will have ripple effects on the functionality of that intersection. So it's not necessarily the typical, traffic engineer, ITE charts about how much traffic it's going to be and the level of service going into and out of your building. It's the impact of those movements on the other, tens of thousands of cars that make it through that intersection on a daily basis. And that's the issue I think that we need to work through.
I'm wondering, I'm trying to think through how you increase parking for what? For which function, and then how you also reduce that footprint at the ground so that you start to move away from the abutting residents. And I'm wondering if was it a metro system that was proposed at the Chronicle?
Oh, yeah.
The listening thing? Well, this is actually a better project for something like that, if it could pull that wall back. And then you said retail has no parking. Would we be looking to provide parking for the retail use within the building, within the property footprint? Is that what you think is necessary?
I don't know. There's got to, and it's right, we're probably only talking 1 or 2 spaces. But right now, if you look around town, like even the building next door, the Rise building, it's got parking out front of the retail spaces and just across the street, right? And so there's I think maybe 6 spaces, right there. And you could go and park up, on Green Street if there's a space there. And I guess so there's a couple of spaces here and there that you could make use of. Here I'm having a hard time seeing, if you were parking here, the only place that you can park that I would see is those couple of spots on Ash Street, and then you have to you have to make your way across the intersection, which takes time, right? And at that point, are people really going to do that?
Yeah, not for a quick thing. Maybe
Right.
if it were, say, nighttime restaurant type use, then because you're going to be there for a while. But if you're just running in to grab a coffee, there's probably something more convenient. I'm just trying to understand that, because if we provided, let's say you could even get 4 spaces for the retail within the building footprint, that means that car has to come into the space without knowing whether there's an available space. And then if it's full, then they have to get back out. And so that's a weird movement.
That's a weird,
That's gonna
yes.
cause even worse traffic than somebody who lives there and knows how to get in and get out. So that's not gonna work. I don't think at all. No matter, you could say you can provide 7 spaces in there for the retail, and it's just not gonna work because you can't see them. You can't know. Stacking system, that could potentially reduce footprint. You could stack all of the cars on the north side and double up the number there, and then change the configuration in the other direction. But it's always been about to me it's always been about the minimal amount of retail we're actually getting out of this for the potential increase in traffic problems.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm stuck. That's why I said that they found a way to get all the pieces in there, but I don't know that they solved the puzzle necessarily. And I like the building. I mean, it's not a horrible building. It's got a lot of good features to it, but there's some edge conditions. I think the biggest problem we ran into here is that the Rise building. It's unfortunate that they couldn't actually capture this site too, because
Yeah.
that could have been more of a bar building, and that part that starts to go to the east to make up for theirs, they probably wouldn't have needed that at all. So that would have been further away from the residential district, right? It just would have been a bar building, because their infrastructure would have worked better. That's not your problem. That's how it should have fallen.
Yes.
Should we open it up to the audience?
Can we call them the public? Because I don't think they're entertained at all.
Public with a capital P.
We have Lieutenant Chris Jones from the police department on Zoom, and he's had his hand raised for a while.
Thank you. I can't see him, so I don't know.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for having me. So Mr. Weston actually took most of my talking points away about the parking. There is no on-street parking there, which is going to create an issue because we've seen the tenants in other buildings just like this who, although it's within a commuter area, they still have more vehicles than the allotted spaces, and they those other buildings have the access to the on-street parking where this has not. And we've already seen requests from the neighboring buildings to change the parking regulations in the area from 2 hours to a lower time limit to increase the turnover. So if there is a retail in this building, on top of the traffic issue from trying to find a space within the building going in and out, the added deliveries to this building is also going to cause a problem in the police department's eyes. Although it is the loading zone, most of the vehicles that are going to be doing deliveries there are going to have to stop on Main Street. We've had other buildings where they have to move in and move out, putting cones out and blocking parking spaces, which we haven't allowed because it's public parking space. You can't just put space savers out like you shoveled it out for a snowstorm in Boston. But the issue here is it's Route 28. We haven't seen that with Rise because they have Green Street right there, so they've been able to use the public area there with this parking. And the other areas, they've been able to use Sanborn Street or Lincoln Street. But with this one, there's no way to put a moving truck on Washington Street, and if you put it on Main Street, it's going to be blocking the lane of Route 28. So I think there's still too many issues with this building.
Through you, Madam Chair, just to respond to that, just in brief, we have previously offered to go through a peer review process at our expense. That offer stands. Certainly willing to have it looked at by Green International. They were the company who reviewed the corridor study that was associated with the Eaton Lakeview 40B project, and it included this intersection. So as I said, that offer still stands, and if they have any recommendations for how to improve the situation, we're certainly open to it. The project does now include a loading zone, so that would handle the move in, move out situation. And in terms of adequacy of parking, that's something that I think can be handled through a parking demand management plan, and that can be required as a condition of approval as well. And we're open to creative solutions in that regard in terms of decoupling the parking spaces from the units. We've already offered that, and I believe that's included in the draft decision that the planning staff has prepared. Limiting the number of vehicles that are allowed per unit to free up as many guest spaces as possible. That's something that's on the table as well. So, we're open to any kind of solution like that, but I believe these kind of issues can be solved through conditions of approval, which is really, that's what we're here to discuss is conditions to make the situation, to improve it.
Lieutenant brought up a good point. Is this entranceway subject to Mass DOT's approval?
That's the part of Main Street that the town owns.
That's
So
ours.
it may
Okay.
not be, I don't wanna speak authoritatively on that, Ryan could answer that better, and maybe Chris knows.
And
But
there's
that's-
there's already curb cut there,
Right.
right? So I'm not sure that MassDOT has a authority.
Curb cut that close to the intersection?
It was in the
Down
entire
further.
thing. Yeah.
You could argue that any part of it was yours. Both sides. Right, and both gas stations have
It's true.
oversized curb cuts. Okay, other public? Want to hear from the abutters first?
I would like to hear from the abutters, absolutely. Please state your name.
Thank you, Bruce Johnson, 166 Washington Street. Thank you for your time. In regard to bylaw 10.5.6, minimum side and rear setbacks, 15 feet in the transitional zone. Garage wall is on the property line. I think it's pretty obvious that that bylaw isn't being met. Setbacks, bylaw 10.5.6, which refers to the design standards 712, particularly in diagram C and D. The current step back is based on the garage wall. If we meet the bylaw for the setback, then any step back should be starting from the building or the second floor. We're also wondering how this project demonstrates the standards 6.2 and 6.4 as noted in a transitional area. It's essentially a 4-story building with a minimal setback at the 4th floor. How does that transition into a residential area? There's plenty of 4-story buildings. We don't see any of that, but a residential property. It's our understanding that according to zoning bylaw 10.561, that a lot this size should have significantly less units than the 12 that are proposed. This is density, and we understand that you're asking for a waiver on density. We're all aware that the bylaws are changing. By a unanimous vote, 126-0. And apparently this application got in before these bylaws just got voted. We would recommend that, we would hope that we wouldn't allow a project to not go by the current bylaws, which is clearly happening here. There's a lot of concerns in regard to the wall and the roof of the wall, but we don't believe it should be there at all. And if it is allowed, then we might have to deal with the design of this enormous thing that's up against our property line. There's other concerns in terms of traffic, safety, the marker in front of their building, which will push traffic into our building. But essentially, those are our main concerns. My wife Lisa has a few things that she'd like to say.
And I do want to make it clear, right? Whatever happened at town meeting, right? We do need to, right, review this in compliance with the zoning bylaws that were in place at the time.
We
And that's
fully understand that.
That's what this board is gonna do, right? There's a lot in there, right? You heard, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of other points on the transitional area. You know, I'm not commenting on that at this point. You probably have some very good points there, but I just want to be clear that, you know, that we're gonna look at this because we're required to, based on the zoning that was in place when it came.
Madam Chair, would you like us through you to respond to Mr. Johnson's feedback or defer for further neighborhood comment?
You can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, through you, Madam Chair, with respect to the first question that Mr. Johnson raised, section 10.5.6 of the zoning bylaw and the section that he mentioned with respect to the rear yard setback, that provision is not applicable to us because the zoning line extends onto the Johnson property, so technically we don't abut a residential zone. That being said, even if it did apply to us, we comply with it in view of guideline 7.1.2 diagram D, which requires a setback of more than 10 feet from the property line, which the upper floors of the project do provide. For the same reason, through you, Madam Chair, we are in compliance with section 7.1.2 and with respect to diagram C, which I believe he mentioned, that for the same reason as noted previously is not applicable to us because we don't abut a residential zone. With respect to design standard 6.2, that pertains to mixed-use development. We comply with that by providing a commercial and residential amenities in this project. 6.4 has to do with connectivity to the neighborhood. We believe we comply with that based on the design of the project and the architecture with traditional residential character, which has continued around the rear of the building and with the design elements that we previously discussed to reduce visual impact to the Johnsons in particular. With respect to Mr. Johnson's concern regarding the density of the project, I would just remind the members that under Chapter 40R, the minimum density permitted for this to qualify as a 40R district is 20 units per acre. So that's the starting point. The 40R, the purpose of that statute is to promote density greater than 20 units per acre. And that, as I mentioned, is the bare minimum that can be permitted for a 40R district. Previous permits that were issued by this commission, including for the RISE 457, have approved density waivers for projects that are far denser than this project. And so we believe that we're entitled to similar treatment, particularly given its proximity to public transport. In terms of why the project would be entitled to this density waiver, through the enactment of the zoning district, the town was entitled to claim state funds, and the approval of this project would entitle the town to additional funds based on the higher density. We believe that in and of itself provides an incentive for this commission to approve the project as it's proposed with this density. And I would also note that approving the project in this location, this transit-oriented location, in the midst of a statewide housing crisis, particularly in this location, would be beneficial to the town greatly in terms of both hopefully not solving, but adding to a solution of the current housing crisis, as well as complying with the town's new requirements under the MBTA zoning, given its proximity to public transport. I believe that covers the questions that Mr. Johnson had, so hopefully that resolves his concerns.
How many affordable units are we getting?
we're not proposing any affordable units. I believe we previously discussed that at 2 hearings ago, and the response at the time was that providing affordable units in this project is not financially feasible.
Sure, I understand, but I mean, it doesn't help with the housing crisis if you're renting me a $3,000 a month apartment, does it?
Well, what I would say in response to that is that there's a housing crisis at all affordability levels, whether it's market rate and affordable units. And I do quite a bit of permitting myself under Chapter 40B, and I do this all over the Commonwealth. And market rate units are badly needed, just as affordable units are needed. And providing more market rate units provides housing for people who otherwise would be driving up home prices, which we're seeing currently now, particularly in the suburban locations like Reading.
I'd just like to add that the rise in the other properties come up as precedent in some areas, but we've brought up the setbacks from the property line at that rise building. Every floor is significantly further set back from our property line in the rear of our property as compared with the proposed development at 459 Main Street. And the developer also said that they would provide a shadow study for us in the last meeting, and we look forward to seeing that and how that's going to impact our property. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, just by way of brief response to that, what I would encourage the members to do is to take a look at the 475 Rise property, particularly its proximity to the rear neighbor on Green Street, which I have taken a look at myself, and it's approximately, I would say, 10 to 12 feet, and it's a 4-story building in that location. So I think, the Johnsons' concerns, we understand that they're concerned about this, and they were concerned about the Rise. They're not the only residential abutters to this project, nor were they to the Rise. My understanding additionally, and perhaps Mr. Johnson can correct me if I'm mistaken about this, but my understanding is that their property has actually been used for a business purpose for a number of years. We are in receipt of records, and we're advised by the current owner of the property that there's some kind of a business use of this property. So, that being said, we do agree that it's a transitional area, and we're trying to do our best to be sensitive, given that the Johnsons do reside there. But my understanding is that it's not exclusively a residential use of their property. It's also has been or is currently used for a business use as well.
You don't have to answer that.
You don't have to answer that.
Lisa Johnson, 166 Washington Street. As my husband said, those first few points about not following the bylaw, the 15 feet, the step backs, all of that. They've told us that they're not treating us as a residential. And I think someone, I'm not sure if it's this board, if it's town council, if it's zoning, I'm not sure who it is, but we were under the understanding when you have a few different things going on in your lot, you're part of 40R, you might be part of Business B, you're also residential. I think we all need to know, before anything else goes further with this, what are we being considered as abutters? I believe I read, but I may be wrong, that's why I want advice. If you're a residential and that's the major part you are of, in other words, there's only so many feet that the line says we're part of 40R. And by the way, whole different meeting, we don't even have any record of notification of that. It just happened on a map one day at a meeting. However, we have 100 feet of a front lawn that we are in the residential zoning. Does anyone here, or would town council be the appropriate people to say, should we be treated as residential abutters, or should we be treated as 40R?
So, actually, town council can chime in on this, but the zoning line, like where that zone boundary is actually a little bit in this case more important than the actual uses that are happening. So I'm gonna defer to town council she's here and she can explain kind of like what CPDC should do. Cause your lot is a split zone lot and you are adjacent to this proposed development site, but because the downtown Sparkle District boundary extends into your property, this property is technically not abutting a residential zone, right? So I basically just said what I think she's gonna say, but
Okay.
just
And
jump right
and
in.
can I just, it's not just the downtown Sparkwood district line, but it's the business B
Right.
district line, so
Right.
the underlying zoning also extends into your
Yes.
property.
That's a good clarification, yes.
So we're three things,
Or three things, yes.
and the residential part is the least important, even though 95% of our lot, like, we are residential, but because that comes over, it kind of gets rid of that, and now we're.
Yeah, it's really where the line is.
And
It's
we
really
didn't
where
really
the
get
zone-
notification on it, I just want.
It's where the zone boundary
that.
line is that I think is what really matters here, so.
And that zone boundary line, I'm assuming, has been in place for a very long time.
So the business B has been in
Decades.
place, yeah, and the reason that it, you know, they don't, sometimes like these old zoning boundary lines don't match property lines is because they're literally like written in the 1940s as like 100 feet from the center line of a road, right? So property lines don't always align nicely with the zone boundary lines.
But the 40R part of it is not.
The 40R part has been in since 2017. And
That's
we
what I
put
meant
it
about
to
the-
match the business B, the
Okay.
underlying business B zone. So yeah,
So therefore, I guess you said you thought you heard something different. I did too, but we're gonna have to do our
Our
research on
understanding
it.
is if there's multiple zones, that it would, the residential zone would be what it would be
So,
deemed by.
So,
So this is,
so you can.
we've been asking for questions, you know,
Yeah,
this
why don't we have
question-
town council clarify this, she's here on the phone.
And she's here right now. Hello.
Madam Chair, for you. So yes, I just wanted to echo what Julie was stating previously. If you look at the district boundary line, the entire boundary between the 459 Main Street and your lot is within the Business B district and the 40R overlay district. And so it doesn't abut a residential zone. The entirety abuts the Business B and the overlay district. I don't know if Andrew's trying to pull it up.
Yep.
Yeah.
yes, he is.
Yeah, so you can see the entirety of their property line abuts the Business B district and the 40R overlay.
Bylaws don't have anything to do with the district, they have to do with property lines.
So, can town council may want to confirm this as well. My understanding is, it's a really important question, is what's in our bylaws about the setbacks and the dimensional standards, just scrolled away from it, has to do with the setback from the residential zone, right? What's in our design guidelines, and what we've been talking about is the transitional zone has to do, or transitional area, it's not a zone, transitional area has to do with the transition to that single, 2, or 3 family residence. So there are two things that are being layered on in addition to the multiple zoning. The setback has to do with the distance to the actual residential zone. The other stuff has to do with, in the design guidelines, has to do with that transitional use next to a single 2 or 3 family property. Does that make any, it's confusing, but does it make any sense?
You did a good job, it's confusing.
I got really familiar with this in the last couple of weeks.
I got less familiar.
Right.
Let's do it every time.
Can I just, yeah, because you asked if I understand, and I think I do because I have a copy of the design guidelines. So I just wanted to clarify based on what Julie and Town Council confirmed. So our first 3 points, it doesn't matter that the wall is right on our property line, because he doesn't have to go back 15 feet. I just wanted to confirm that. And it doesn't matter what they say in the zoning bylaw about the step backs, because again, we're not being seen as a residential. I will say when you get to the design guidelines, which Heather just mentioned, let me just see this one section. And I don't believe, like you said, this has as much to do with the zone as much as it is it talks about Reading's identity, respect to exist, this is the part you were talking about, single family, two family, three family residential uses without unduly encroaching upon them. This is the guidelines, design guidelines 6.2, without unduly encroaching upon them. So am I correct that this more has to do with the single, two family and three family uses? This isn't, are you in residential, are you in business B, correct? So you don't want something that's going to unduly encroach upon them. 6.4, primary goal of the DSGD is to provide a broad range of residential housing types at moderate density and or close to the downtown, all of that. Intended to provide a positive transitional area for surrounding neighborhoods and to avoid abrupt transitions where possible. Overall site design should account for and include sensible anticipated, we're fine with the architecture, it's pretty. Surrounding neighborhoods should also be protected from unwanted traffic, visual intrusion, negative impacts to the pace and scale of their environment. So again, I just want to confirm, this is something that should be looked at because we're in a two-family home, not because we're residential, right? So, okay, so it's good to hear that's going to be considered. I don't know if Ryan is the town engineer is still on, but in his most updated memo, he actually mentioned, aside from things in his past memo that still are, outstanding, the roof media appears to have changed from a green roof to traditional landscape, hardscape. I'm confused too because we've heard a lot of different what this roof is going to be. But Ryan does ask for how will stormwater and snow be contained and conveyed away from any neighboring properties. And a drainage analysis should be considered. So now I'm not sure even where maybe the board is at with, well, is the roof really approved and the engineer thinks it's all working? Did the engineer get everything he needs? Because we're so close to it, I want to know about that snow and ice and water too. So I don't know if the engineer is still here or not.
It's not.
No.
Those are valid points. And we have not seen a materials
Right.
list at this point.
Well, they described it, I mean, they folded the roof so that the water actually doesn't go to the edge, it comes inboard and then only pitches towards Washington Street to be collected. I think that's their intent, but certainly they should answer that question.
Yeah, I'd be interested in the answer to that.
I just felt that the engineer dating on May 12th, which was recent, it was after the last meeting, it was after everything was observed, he's still asking for that. So I don't know if he's clear on it either. But why would he ask on May 12th about drainage and snow?
I don't know, I'm looking at the April 7th submission, which is the active submission, right?
Mhm.
Why don't we have the applicant answer the question about drainage from that roof?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, I must beg ignorance of Mr. Percival's more recent letter. I've not seen a submission from him dated May 12th, but we'll certainly take a look at that and make sure that we're responding to any concerns that he may have. In terms of the stormwater, you're correct, Mr. Spina, that the pitch of the roof was designed to pull water back towards the site where it will be collected. And for the Johnson's information and anyone who's curious, this project will be subject to the state stormwater standards as well as any local requirements you may have. And what that means for a project like this is that the post-development runoff from the site must be no greater than what's provided there now. So when you drive by that site, obviously everybody sees it's a service station with entirely covered with impervious surfaces. There's no stormwater management controls of any kind. So when we get a 2-year storm or a 5-year storm or a 10-year storm, all that runoff goes onto the Johnson's property now, completely uncontrolled, same as it does into the street, into the Rise property. It goes everywhere, and there's no management of it of any kind. This project will be required to comply with the state stormwater standards, which requires us to ameliorate that condition. And it's a rigorous review through Mass DEP. We'll be going through that later in the permitting process. But that's a requirement. Whether Mr. Percival is satisfied by the project or not, we also have to go to the state and get satisfaction from that.
May I make a comment on that, because I'm also really interested, again, how you're going to control the stormwater from the parking that slopes generally toward the abutters, where right now, sure, it's all impervious area, unless that entire area is entirely sloped toward the abutting property, I think it's a stretch to say that they're receiving all of the stormwater. So I think it is a pertinent question on the portion of the property, portion of the project where the roof generally slopes toward them. Where will that drain to? Is it going to, and will it be overflowing onto their property? Will it be draining to the front of the property? Where will it be draining to is also something that I think is a good question to be asking.
I don't believe our engineer is on the line tonight, Ms. Klitsch, but I can certainly ask him to be prepared to respond to that in the future. My understanding was that the project stormwater management systems have not yet been designed. However, what I will say, I'll just repeat what I said previously. Whatever the design of the system, it has to comply with the state stormwater standards, and that means that it has to either equal or reduce the amount of runoff that's coming on to the Johnson's property currently. So we can't make it worse under the state law. We have to make it either equal or the same as what the condition is now. Equal or better, excuse me.
Are there any other hands raised?
Sorry, go.
I just want, it's just off of the topics we were on, so I thought I should ask for them now. I saw on the draft decision, I wasn't even aware of this from earlier, I must have missed it, but with that garage drive aisle width, 24 when 26 is required, not as an abutter other than the traffic situation, I have mentioned a few times about the concern of with the loading area inside a garage, and that's where FedEx and UPS and Amazon, all of that's gonna go in there. Any box trucks, if there's a retail, a restaurant, any of that. If it's not real easy for them to go in and out, I think we see it sometimes already. The avoidance, you wanna do a quick delivery, your UPS goes on the half on the sidewalk and half in the street to do something quickly. Now that I'm seeing there's a waiver for even 2 feet shorter, and I'm really wondering why a waiver for that would be when already there's been concerns. Lieutenant Christopher Jones mentioned the concern of the congestion, and he said deliveries. And some of you have mentioned what if the parking was changed and then people don't know, is there parking in there? I do see a lot of chances of some pulling over real quick to do something quick, and I think asking for a waiver in a situation where it already isn't good because of the location, and then to waive making it more narrow, I just was hoping you guys would think about that. And yes, I know specifically, it might have been Heather and you all agreed, before the next meeting, please have a shadow study that's done in a way that the Johnson's house is in it. And they showed a shadow study that doesn't have our house, and we are at the next meeting, and there's no shadow study. So I hope we do get to see that before this gets approved. One question about trash, because it's a little confusing. It is usually brought up as being on the corner on Main Street. There was, on the planning update, page 6, dated April 5th, 2022, yeah, 1922, I wish we wouldn't be here. It shows it on the corner of Washington Street. So I don't know if it moved along the way or that drawing just was incorrect, but it's the most recent drawing, because it's the planning update, April 5th. So before I get more concerned about How is the trash getting picked up? How often is it getting picked up? I'm kind of concerned, is it right next to my property or not?
Through you, Madam Chair, could we have Jeff clarify? My understanding is that the trash room is at the corner of the site adjacent to Main Street near the loading spot.
That's correct. It is near the loading spot now, so that it's convenient to both the retail and the residential.
So there isn't anything on the corner of Washington, even though it is on a drawing from April 5th?
In the very early part of the project, we left the two entrances and exits to the project, kind of neutral. And it was through one of the early meetings discussion with the town regarding what would be the most efficient, convenient pickup route for the town to gather trash from the building. And it was at that time decided that Main Street was preferred to Washington Street for all the reasons that have been mentioned about cars backing up on Washington Street. So that's why it's now located off of Main Street, adjacent the loading area and the retail.
Great, and that's regular town recycle and trash pickup. It's not like a separate private one?
Yeah, correct. The operation of that will be left to the building owner, but that will be that is where our trash collection will be on Main Street. And then I'd also like to just, if you're looking at an older plan, we've also set back from the sidewalk adjacent to your property. And this image is on the right corner. Yep, exactly. So in our most recent iteration, we were proposing a similar type of bush landscape that you have in front of your own house. So we would continue the plantings that you have in front of your house into that location, so it would all kind of be aligned. And then additionally, you can see how the edge of the roof has a portion that butterflies back to the center. So it'll collect water and drain, and may even potentially be collected into a rain garden type feature that we could install at that setback location. But as Jesse's already indicated, all this is going to be within the state's regulation for stormwater management. And we've been very thoughtful about how we've organized the sidewalk and all of the entrances and the way that the operations of the building are going to occur around each of those.
Thank you. So my last question, and I know there's other people that want to speak, something I brought up a couple of times in email, and I'm not sure how often you get more detailed information about construction management. I know that sometimes comes a little bit later. I do feel this is a very, as Lieutenant Jones said as well, a very unique, as you have, location. This is very, very different from any of the other mixed-use 40R developments. In their draft, and it is just a draft of their construction management, it says, no construction vehicles will be allowed to park on Main Street or Washington Street. Now, they're suspecting 16 months of construction, and I just feel because of this location, would the Cpdc want to consider where are they going to park those vehicles? Where is the entrance and the exit for all those months? Because every other development has a very quiet road adjacent. Some have parking lots behind it. They all have parking spaces in front. So those are barricaded. That's where the big tractors come in. We've all lived through it. How about this location? If they're not going to park on Main or Washington, that leaves my driveway in the Rise building. There's nowhere else. So can we get that information up front, please?
You could respond.
Well, I would suggest, if I can, like that's something that we need in writing and
We
sort of
do.
like detailed. Point well made. And I guess that's a little bit of concern here, right, is there's a lot of talking. We really need some of this sort of in it's not fair to us to write, Jeff does a great job of describing stuff, but we need time to look at it and review what changes, are being proposed, if any, instead of, these conversations that we could do this, we could do that.
Yeah, and to have it kind of clearly written
yeah.
down so that we know what we're evaluating.
Yeah, and I really don't think it's the vehicle parking that's the issue, because there's an empty lot across the street they could rent out, right? It's they're gonna have to stage construction at some point to
Yeah.
lift things from Main Street probably, because Washington Street won't work. So that means that there's a portion of that roadway that has to be closed off for a crane or some other device, and that's not a one day, you're not gonna rent it for a day. So that's the kind of depth I think we need on that plan. Parking's easy.
Yeah.
Relatively easy.
Well, to respond to that, board members, I can speak with my clients about that. It's somewhat challenging at this early stage in the permitting process to provide a lot of helpful detail in terms of construction management, because every construction company, and ours hasn't been selected yet, every construction manager will have their own sets of procedures and how they would handle this site. There's not one way to do it. It's obviously it's a small site, and we're proposing to build on most of it, so we certainly recognize the issue. But I'll speak with my client about that and see if we can get some offers from prospective construction management companies who they've worked with in the past in terms of how they would handle the site. And just to come back, if I may, real briefly on the point of stormwater, I misspoke previously when I said that I didn't think that the system had been designed. It has been designed. It's shown on our civil plan C3, which shows a system of storm tech detention basins. And just for the Johnson's edification, in case they don't know what that means, what that means is it's a set of tanks. They're installed under the building before it's built, and it holds a certain amount of stormwater, and the size of those systems is required by state regulation to be sized based on the amount of impervious surface that's on the site. So they'll be sized to comply at least with that minimum requirement to contain that amount of water for the applicable storm events for this location. Yeah, Andrew is showing it there. Those looks like water tanks in the center there. Yep, he's got his mouse cursor right on it. And what those do is they're required to hold a certain amount of water. There's an emergency overflow that sends it off towards the street, which would be collected by the town's stormwater management system. And the tanks themselves hold a certain amount of water, and they're required to release them back into the ground within a certain amount of time, and I believe that's 72 hours. So that's in a nutshell how the stormwater on a site like this is managed. There will be downspouts that are located around the building to make sure that roof water is collected, including the roof at the rear of the site adjacent to the Johnson's property.
But you'll also probably need rails or cleats to hold the snow up on that slope too, right? So it's not just a smooth run of panels.
I believe that's right, yeah.
We have another comment from the public.
Sorry, yes, please.
I'll be a minute. My name is Bob Cameron. I'm not in Nevada. I live at 37 Warren Avenue, and it's Mr. Weston and Lieutenant Jones kind of stole my thunder. He said when the traffic comes in and out, it will have ripple effects. It's a really tough intersection. I love all the condo buildings, the apartments that have gone up. They've replaced eyesores. This is an attractive building, but I think it's a recipe for disaster, having the cars come in via Washington Street. That's it.
Thank you.
I have a question I want to sort of understand. So, as I said before, I understand that we're looking at this based on our zoning that is actually in place right now, which was pre town meeting. But I also understand, right, that they submitted subdivision preliminary subdivision plan. I guess I'd like to understand, right, that's unusual for a site that you're trying to develop as a single site to file for subdivision. I understand that puts a marker for the proposal, but what I'd like to understand is what other impacts does that have in the way that we look at this? So, right, it's now being, it was a single site. We now have a proposal for it to be 2 sites, which means all the underlying base data that were being submitted really needs to be redone, or do we need to do the subdivision first to approve the subdivision and then go through, or is the subdivision absolutely approved, or is the subdivision there and we just ignore that it was, like, what's that whole thing? Like, how do you deal with that, right? Where you have like 2 applications for 2 completely different things on one parcel by the same developer. And I'm just.
Madam Chair, I can,
Yes, please.
Madam Chair, I can answer that question.
For you.
So Jesse and I spoke, counsel for the applicant and I spoke at length, and I think that 40R is still new and there haven't been extensive court cases on it. So there's some potential ambiguity about the application of the existing zoning bylaw to this current proposal. Submission of the preliminary subdivision plan sort of resolves that and puts to rest any question whatsoever about how we should examine the existing proposal. The prior zoning applies. In terms of whether we need to wait until a final subdivision plan is filed, the answer to that question is no. This should not result in the CPDC looking at this application any differently. You will examine the application as submitted and determine whether it complies with the 40R bylaw that is still in existence, or we'll call it the one pre-town meeting. So you do not have to wait until they move forward with any finalized subdivision approval.
So,
and I don't know, Jesse, if you want to add anything to that.
No, I agree 100%.
So then what do we need to do with the subdivision application, right? There's a timeline, there are specific timelines related to that. So now do we have to have separate hearings on that subdivision? And what's that mean? Like, right? I mean, we can't just accept it and let it sit, right? Because there's some statutory requirements we have with that.
Right, so they have 7 months to fill out and submit a finalized plan. So until that time period, we just wait. Staff has requirements under the statute and your regulations to kind of speak with the applicant, and they can do that at their own time. But there really isn't anything for the CPDC to do at this moment. And I think, it's an unusual situation to see these preliminary subdivision approvals plans submitted prior to town meeting in Reading. This is, to my knowledge, the first time that we've received one. But this is a common tactic that developers use across the Commonwealth to sort of freeze the zoning. And so this is not unusual to see something like this be submitted.
Sorry, Igor, can you clarify what has to happen with the preliminary plan that's been submitted?
So generally, if a preliminary plan is submitted, then staff will reach out to the applicant and work with them prior to their submittal of a finalized subdivision plan. And that once that plan is submitted, the applicant has 7 months to do that. Once that plan is submitted, that's when it triggers requirements for the CPDC.
In town, we don't have any regulations that require us to have a public meeting on submitted subdivisions, aside from, the Massachusetts regulations.
Where we've gotten preliminary plans filed before, Ivrea, we've had hearings with CPDC. We haven't waited for a definitive.
You have, okay.
Yes.
And so you haven't waited for the definitive plan to be
No,
filed?
we get the preliminary plan because they wanna understand the preliminary feasibility of a project before
Yeah.
they fully design.
And I guess I thought that was part of our,
Right.
I mean, I could go down through and look, I
Yeah,
thought
so
that
I'll
was
have
part
to
of
look
our
at your
internal
regulations to see if that's required. To be honest, I have to apologize, I'm not as familiar with your regulations, but from my understanding at the statute level, there isn't a requirement that the planning boards or CPDC in this case hold any hearings. If you have a practice of doing it in your town, we'll have to look at that and, we can work with the applicant to make sure that process is moving forward. But like I said, they have 7 months to file.
And do they need to file a definitive plan for the zoning freeze to remain effective or not?
No, so this is a complicated thing. I think we'll have to kind of evaluate it. Our initial impression is that they do not. I think what's important here is that, the application as submitted needs to be reviewed and examined in accordance with the existing 40R bylaw.
Which, right, that's what I said I completely understand. I just wanted I wanted to see what other sort of ripple effects that the filing may have on sort of either the way we look at it or other steps that we need to take that we may not have needed to take if that wasn't filed. So I get.
Yeah, I can look at your regulations, but at this point, the CPDC doesn't have to do anything.
Thank you. So, do we have any other questions or comments at this point? I do think,
I think we need more information.
yeah, and I guess I think that we need to be very specific about what information that we are expecting, because I understood, right, and I wasn't there, but I watched it, right? There were expectations of information coming that, right, we don't have. So, and maybe that was lack of clarity or, I don't know. So.
Yeah, just an outstanding one, I apologize for kind of jumping around, is that for shadow studies, which were brought up again, I think by the abutters, because I believe we wanted to really understand the impact not only to the Johnsons on Washington Street, but the abutters at Rise 475. Just throw that out there as well.
Agreed.
No shadow on their building.
You kidding me? They're so close.
Right up against it.
Right.
Maybe,
yeah.
Frankly, their wall is like a big rectangle against this, this gambrel kind of mansard roof thing, so.
Yeah.
I don't care about them. I care about the east side, the residential stuff.
So do we need to make a list of the additional information we're looking for? And I guess then there's a key question of, we didn't get additional information at this meeting. I guess I'd love clarity to confirm what I think I heard. Was the applicant talking about coming back with additional information at a future meeting that could be received by a deadline as discussed last time?
Yeah, I think we talked as a team since the last hearing. We didn't feel that additional project changes were necessary in terms of updated filing materials. If there's additional information that the commissioners would like to see or would be helpful for your review in terms of assessing these project impacts, that certainly would be helpful on our end to have a sense of what it is that you're looking to see that's not already shown on the plans. That being said, we're doing our best to try to work with the Johnsons and with the board members to go through these concerns and resolve them. But we are looking to conclude this hearing sooner rather than later. And just, we are at this point several weeks beyond the 120-day review period. We have not filed for constructive approval of the project because we want to continue working with the board. But we do want to bring this project in for a landing. And ideally that would be at the next meeting.
So let's go over the things that we are expecting and what I just heard you say is that, that what we're gonna get from you for next meeting is what we're gonna get, right? And we'll have to make a decision based on that.
Yep.
So I'm gonna rely a little bit here on Andrew, because I know he was taking good notes. I guess in what I have, and I wasn't taking any, what I have, right, you need to deal with a revised plan that looks at the parking, the compact parking spaces differently, right? We need additional information, right, on the roof, right? Nick just mentioned, a rail on the roof. I think there's some information that is still outstanding from the town engineer on his first and second memo. The second one, which you haven't received, you mentioned that you didn't see yet.
Wall, right, we talked about the wall and how it's landscaped and how that's maintained, if there's enough
space
how's
there.
it maintained, does the wall have to move back in order for there to be something to grow on it, if that's what we're doing?
Right, it's gonna be a green wall, redesigned, we talked about some potential ways to change that.
I wanna revise my statement about the rise building, by the way. It's not so much the shadow that it's gonna cast on that south wall, it's that's gonna block every single one of those windows.
Yes, it will.
That's the impact. Have we heard anything from any of the rise? I guess they're all full rentals.
Yeah.
Okay.
I sent it to them to distribute.
Yeah, so it's not so much the shadows,
It's just complete blocking, yeah,
Lose yourself
completely blocking.
completely, yeah, so it's more important to see what's happening to the residential pieces on the side. But beyond that, is there a bigger issue? I mean, we're sitting here tweaking this little thing, but is traffic gonna work whether the shadows are right or wrong?
No, and so I guess, right, the to me, the big thing that you've heard here, right, I'm gonna say there's a tweaks on the design, right, but there's two big issues that I think are out there. One is how the building interacts with the residential property, with the Johnsons. And then how does the access into and out of the facility work? You heard Nick's comments about, many people's comments about circling in and out. Does that work for the retail, right? You need to change the parking sizes. There's a comment about whether it's advisable to reduce the drive aisle width. I think that's a lot of input there, and if you feel like that what you have is the best plan that you have, then with all that input, then then I guess you don't need to do anything. But I would expect that with all that input that you might have a different plan that addresses some of those issues.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Yeah, we can take that back as a team and figure out how we can incorporate those.
So I guess that begs the question of, do you want to continue the hearing?
Yes, as I said before, we're willing to work with the board. We want to continue to work with the board towards an approval of the project, so yes.
I'm sorry, in my summary of the issues, was there other things? I think that, no, but.
No, the construction management.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and right, I guess that's right. I mean, a number of us work in the industry. It's not unusual, right? We're not looking for details, but even in MIPA documents that are done on 15% design, they have pretty detailed construction management plans. Not exactly where everything's going to go, but everyone can see that this is going to have an impact. Like when lifting, you got to figure out where that lifting is happening. You got to figure out where are people going to park. You have a certain amount of vehicles that are going to need to be both delivering materials and then workers. And so, right, the details can change, but some of that is some pretty basic core information about how this is going to work.
Understood. That's something I've done in the past on 40B projects, so we'll sharpen our pencils and see what we can do to provide more detail from what was previously provided.
Even any room for construction trailer.
What's that?
Like, where's the
Where's the
construction?
dumpster
Where's the
gonna go?
construction trailer?
Probably have to rent space
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah.
So you have a slot at 8:30 on June 13th, which is your next scheduled meeting date.
Okay. Does that work?
We will take it. Yes, thank you.
And so we would like revised and additional information no later than June 1st, so that staff have a chance to actually review the information.
Okay, that's a Wednesday, right, Julie?
Yes.
June 1st.
Yes.
Does that need to go into the motion? Or is that? No. Okay. All right, so I'll move to continue the hearing on the 40-hour plan review for 459 Main Street to June 13th at 8:30.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you, one and all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We would like to take a break, yes.
To the grandfather clock.
There was a grandfather clock there?
Did it ever work?
Okay.
I don't like it for anything.
My
else.
husband uses.
I don't like how it's like its own separate thing.
Yeah.
Kind of like the messaging aspect of it. It seems to be maybe.
But the older version.
This year, he didn't even try out for basketball.
Small.
Went straight to track.
Yeah, the old.
Small, yeah.
Now it's like this big one.
So yeah,
You
you're
have a
the
calendar
whole
too.
stretch there. They're like,
The pain hasn't stopped until graduate school's gone.
Sorry.
Yeah, I know.
I know.
I felt
just-
one set of bills.
I'm sure Jackson is also like, he probably is like, how?
Okay, we're coming back on the clock. Okay,
I know, one step at a time.
I didn't have to deal with you. I went to West Point. I was all set. And graduate school twice. I'll take care of it. Thank you, US taxpayers.
Okay, I have to find it.
Okay, we're back on the clock. So that means that Johnson Woods is the next item on our agenda.
Good evening, my name is William Bergeron, I'm with the firm of Hayes Engineering. And with this project since the beginning, as some of you know. We thought we did everything right this time on lot one. We ended up going to engineering, worked with engineering with several iterations, went through and got the Cpdc, I guess, to sign off on the plan, got a building permit, got it to the stage where we're putting the roof on, and we got a cease and desist for the lot because the building orientation changed a little bit. So we're here to discuss lot, building number one. And the reason that basically it basically just cocked about 15 degrees was when we were working back and forth with engineering. I think that if you do the next one, it shows the reason why the sanitary sewer was directly in front of the portion of that site. You could see where the prior building footprint was going to be. And engineering thought it was a little bit too close. They didn't like the way that laid out relative to where the buildings were. So we rotated the building away from the sewer line to get a little bit more flexibility with that. And I think with the alignment that we made the change there, it kind of aligns better with the next building down relative to blending in with Court Street. So that was the modification that was made for that. And the reason for that was relative to basically making accommodations for the sanitary sewer. So we would hope that since it's up at the roof stage now, that we would be able to get a clarification and approval for the way that it was actually constructed and originally approved.
That's the approved rotation, or is that the current rotation?
The original, what is the dotted line
There it
underneath?
is, yeah, I
The
see it.
approved plan that we got the building permit for is the layout that's there now.
So it had to be handed.
And that's how it's constructed.
Say again, that's how it's constructed?
Yes.
So the
This
dash,
building
We
exists.
were issued a building permit for this, it was all approved, and the foundation was poured, the structure's all framed in, and they were working on the roof, and we got a stop order for this.
Okay. So your footprint now has changed, and have you changed it already or not? You're just waiting for us to.
It's constructed. It's
It's
constructed.
constructed.
We're just trying to close a administrative loop, I guess. See, so
They
this
can
is
get the
for you
roof
guys.
on.
removed.
Yeah, we didn't realize we made a mistake.
Okay. So it's the same exact footprint rotated, no changes to stairs or?
If I can ask, how did it
That is
come to light? Right after the building permit, right, you generally don't go back and look at plans like a building permit, like how did that come to light that it was rotated?
All these buildings have neighbors. The neighbors reached out to us and we looked at it and realized that we should not have signed off on the building permit. So.
So let's talk about, can you zoom back out so we can see what's going on? Hold on, you'll get a second. Well, that's not really the whole plan, but what's the impact to neighbors? Be closer to anything, be infringing on yard space, driveways.
We meet all the setbacks. We have a little bit more space in the front yard than originally anticipated. Driveways are a little bit bigger, so it makes them work better. And we have a little bit more space between this building and the next building.
Just can't figure out where it is.
Yeah, so it's, seeing it in
very
context, it's right by the entrance of Johnson Woods and it backs up to butters on Enos Circle.
Oh, okay, but we can't really see those houses.
Those homes are not shown on this plan.
No, they are not.
So is the change that we're directly faces the back of others than before? Yeah, I'm also looking at like what the actual difference.
Yeah, we're not seeing that on these plans.
It's hard to see on this plan, but the building is shifted closer to the Enos Circle of butters, like.
The top corner, the
Yeah.
12 o'clock.
Yeah,
You can see it's
yeah.
rotated closer, but it's still within the setback, it's
Yes.
beyond the setback.
It meets all the setbacks.
So the question really is, if it had come to us in its this configuration, would we have rejected it?
Right,
I doubt it.
and me too.
You wanna take, I don't know, questions from, are you in a butter? Sorry.
No, I'm actually on the trustees. Johnson was transitioned to Board of Trustees, there's five of us.
Okay,
Board of Trustees. We actually had Ted brief us on it and said, okay. Going to CPDC from now on, we gotta see it. And because it is I actually live,
Can you say your name?
I live over on
Can you say your
28
name?
Johnson.
Yes.
Brendan Graham, sorry. I live almost across the street. I'm on 28 Johnson Woods and just past this existing garage is up on the first set on the left. Anyway, it was built and he just rotated it slightly for the sewage. So it made sense to us.
Thank you. To comment that it's closer to the Enos Circle property that just came in there.
Yep.
I don't wanna say it's irrelevant because there's a setback requirement from the property line and it needs to be at least that. It looks like we maintain the minimum setback, right?
Yes.
And the other one is beyond what's allowed. Oh, sorry, beyond the minimum.
Yeah.
What's required.
And that's the deck that's meeting the minimum, not the actual structure is much.
A deck is how high?
Deck's probably on the first floor, but it's 28 feet, it's 20.
No, I understand, but I mean, a deck that's 1 foot off the ground is different than a deck that's 6 feet off the ground.
It's on the first floor.
So that's the correct setback. Which means the building face itself is a little further back.
We can Lisa is chatting in the Zoom. I don't know if we wanna,
Do we wanna open it up?
Is
We have
there somebody
finished.
on Zoom who wants to comment?
yes.
Do we have any additional comments from the board? No, open it up to general comment. Have somebody on Zoom?
Lisa, if you'd like, you can unmute and go ahead. Joanne also has her hand raised.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes. Please
Sorry.
state your name and your
This is-
address.
I live on Eno Circle, in number 51.
Okay.
And I just know, some of my neighbors are down by that first building. It's right in their backyards. And it was their understanding that that building was built closer to their property than it was originally supposed to.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh.
That's it.
Oh, just that originally those buildings weren't supposed to be quite so close to their properties, their backyards. So I was just wondering, were those, when they adjusted the original building, did they move them back closer to the property on Eno Circle?
Lisa, it looks like they did more of a rotation so that if you're looking at the plan, the top corner of the building is closer.
Right,
But the
but
other-
overall they're not?
They didn't slide the building back, it looks like they rotated it. You can see there's like a wedge of the building that is definitely closer, but it's beyond the minimum that it's allowed to be. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, it does.
I'm sure visually when you're staring at it, at the building, it probably seems closer. But when you look at the
Yeah.
math, the math works.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it seemed like, it was very close to the property line.
What do we know?
Same with the other ones being built down at the end of Eno Circle.
Well, we don't have the benefit of seeing the properties on Ennis Circle itself, so we really can't see where your
Okay.
properties are in regard to the brick wall that's there, the stone wall.
And it actually looks to me like, the corner that's closest to that stone wall isn't all that much closer than the original
Yeah,
plan. It's just
maybe
been rotated. It actually looks like it's maybe very similar or even a little further away.
Right.
If you're just measuring from the stone wall to that closest corner.
Okay.
This is the area here.
Yep.
The applicant has a.
Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
Brad Latham, attorney for the applicant. Couple of points, if I may. The building is really is rotated about the same distance from the lot line as it was before. It exceeds the distance required by zoning even for a single-family house lot. There's a good amount of set off there. And by rotating, it actually is farther away from the abutting unit 3 than it was originally.
What do we know about landscaping on that property line? Do we have a landscaping plan?
We don't have a landscaping plan submitted, but there is a requirement that 20-foot setback from the parcel boundary be landscaped. That's within the PUD bylaw. So I guess are any of these trees sufficient? Are they gonna come down? Is there?
I don't think anybody can say that the landscaping at Hudson Woods is deficient in any stretch.
I actually think from a community-wide perspective, I think this looking at what else is going on here, having the driveways be longer is actually a benefit. It looks like there's about another car length, at least on one of the drives, than there originally was. And Right, we heard loud and clear that the parking here is an issue, so having more car storage space, I think, probably in the
Do we think those
is probably
trees are?
better than, is probably a benefit overall than the minimal change, if any, in the setback in the back.
Do we think those trees are on the Johnson Wood side of the property line? Those trees, that's the back lot, that's the east circle line. That picture that Andrew was just showing.
Okay.
It's actually not very close to.
The trees are basically straddling the line. You can see the line that's there. They're probably on both sides, but we're not touching those.
28 feet away, I can't imagine you're anywhere near the root zone.
No.
For that, those should survive.
There aren't, anything that's gonna happen has already happened because it's
Oh,
already
yeah,
been
yeah,
done.
that's right. So those trees weren't affected at
Committed.
all? Okay, so that's good. That's a pretty good screen.
Do we have
No issues.
anybody else have their hands raised?
Joanne Fitzgerald.
Joanne, please speak up.
Hi, this is Joanne Fitzgerald. I live over in 6 Enos Circle. I was just curious to know why the construction started before this was even approved. Like the construction started in February, but this didn't even seem to be approved yet. So that's one point I'd like to make. The second point, I'm wondering how the drainage in this area isn't very good. Like the water piles in our backyard, and we have a storm drain that feeds out into the conservation land. And I'm wondering if there's been any sort of environmental survey done to see how this construction or new drainage would affect that.
Thank you, Joanne. Did you want to address that, sir?
All of the original drainage, particularly in the back of these units, was all part of the original approved plans, and it was all built consistent with that. And there is a large stormwater management area that's on the opposite side of the street. It actually diverts a lot of the water that was originally going towards Enos Circle into that stormwater management area, and that is controlled and let out at a slow rate into the drainage system in West Street.
And can you tell me when you applied for and got approval for building?
Yeah,
Please.
no construction started before we got a building permit. As I indicated originally, and I don't know if you heard, originally we ended up getting approval to work with the town engineer to actually rotate the building because of sewer construction issues that they were seeing with the original construction. So the structure that's on the ground now was actually issued a building permit, was approved by the Cpdc staff, was approved by engineering, and then when we got to the stage that it's at now, the building inspector did a stop work order because of what we're talking about right now, because the building shifted a little bit. So no construction started without a valid building permit.
Okay. Are there any other questions on Zoom?
I do not see any hands raised at this moment.
Well,
Is there another part to this?
Two more.
Two more
On the
parts to
building.
this.
Oh, right, I am sorry.
Doing them
Lumped it all
individually?
together.
Let's go for the other ones.
Don't wanna finish this one first?
I
No,
would
they're all
say,
lumped together in
yeah,
the same
let's-
decision,
yeah.
so let's do them.
Oh.
The next building is building 29.
Well, you can do whatever one you want first, but.
Well, we originally weren't talking about 12 because 12 was not in with the recommendations for the original ones, but if you wanna put 12 up, we can talk about 12.
Sure.
12 again has foundations in place. The original building permit, and that building permit is still effective. But being overly cautious, we wanted to make sure that everybody understood that, again, the rotation of these are the two single families on Green Meadow Drive. And we just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that, particularly the building that's on the right-hand side, it was too close to the emergency drive over to Venus Circle. So we wanted to kind of rotate that, again, counterclockwise, so we had the proper distance to Venus Circle. Other than that, you can see that the footprints are pretty much where they originally were as far as setbacks to the property line at the end of Venus Circle. Like I said.
Excuse me, what was the reason for doing this rotation?
Distance from the corner of the projected, the original building to this emergency driveway was very close. So we want to just get more of a distance between these two, so that we didn't have something right immediately adjacent to the access drive. The other, like I said, these foundations are already in place. So we didn't get a stop work order or anything on this. We just wanted to let the Cpdc know that this is what happened on this, and we got the building permits for this. We didn't want it to go through the same thing we did on lot 1.
Are these two units that we talked about
Yes.
in past years?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
I don't think so.
Yes, this was originally one unit, and it was split into 2 units, and then we adjusted.
Like how long ago? Cause we couldn't find that we had discussed these before.
It's in my time.
There's been a lot of changes and we've gone through a lot of different
maybe not.
numbers and they all have different unit numbers and different addresses.
All right, okay.
We could not find that we had discussed this one recently.
No, we discussed another one, I'm trying to find it.
There was another
4 to 8. There were 9, I'm
We were
pretty
all
sure.
in-
68 White Oaks Lane.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's been a lot.
There's 9.
So we were trying to figure out, like, that's one reason that some of these mistakes happen is like we were mistakenly believed that they had been approved by you. And then realized our error, so.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
What's the distance between the buildings as they are in the dark solid lines compared to the original configuration? It looks like it's 15 some feet. I guess, are the buildings moved closer to, just kind of, Chase, are the buildings moved closer together and are they still within?
No, they're still parallel to each other, they're the same distance apart.
Looks like from some discussions, 15.6 feet was previously approved, is now 15.7 feet.
And what about the reduction in the top corner to
building 11?
Building 11, yeah.
17.9 previously approved, 17.7 proposed.
Well, 17.9 to the bottom corner, but the top corner.
I believe the top was, at least that's what their email had indicated in email.
Did they go through the trustees for that one too?
Yeah, the trustees looked at all these and we said, we're okay with it.
Okay.
I guess I'm gonna say, in general, right, if buildings rotate, some in the setbacks are generally the same, I don't have an issue with that. Nick pointed to the one spot where it did make a little bit, well, it's probably 8 feet or so difference in that front corner of the, right, where it is 17.7, right? I mean, that's the one spot of this whole thing that I think is a change. I don't have a problem, I mean, if no one has a problem with it, I'm fine.
I mean, the foundations are already in, I haven't heard any complaints.
You can just put in foundations real quick and I say.
Until the building goes up.
Not a bad strategy.
No. As you know, we've been trying to finish this out. COVID actually slowed things down, but we've been trying to speed things up to close this out. We know you want us to do that. And we've been, religiously going and trying to get building permits to finish these areas out. This is the last construction in Green Meadow Drive, and that area is closed out now.
We do have a raised hand on Zoom.
Zoom, go ahead.
iPad.
Hi, guys, this is Patty Dalton. I live at 10 Green Meadow, which I think is building 17. I just have a question about what does this change due to the length of their driveways? As you know, and you've already said, I think the parking scenario on Green Meadow has been a headache for all of us. I've been here since day one, pretty much, and that's always a concern for us here. It looks to me like it might have shortened the driveways from what maybe was the original plan, but can't tell.
Where are the driveways on these cars, on these? Is that to the left of the stair?
That looks like.
Have the driveways been put in?
I mean, maybe left.
Pardon me?
Have the driveways been put in?
No, it's only the foundation stage.
It doesn't look to me like, right, if one of them's now 21, right, which is the shorter one, right under where it says Green Meadow Drive there.
Yes.
That one looks like it's a little bit shorter, but certainly not a car length shorter. I mean, maybe it went from 25 down to 21. It's still a parking spot.
But the one on the other building though, is it really gonna go to the left of the stair? Cause now it looks like you're gonna lose on-street parking if you do that. Whereas if you went on the right side, you lose that.
Yeah, that right now is a you're right, a guest parking spot.
Just a single spot?
Yeah, it's one spot. It's a problem. We could move that space to between these two driveways.
Yeah, I guess you could do that. Might be a better solution because your foundation's into your garage is already set, right?
We have no problem with doing that.
Does that work? Does it fit? Looks like it fits.
Sure.
Looks like it might just fit. You could leave a small space in there, maybe compact or something. As long as
If we need all the parking we can get on that street, there's 2 parking spaces and it's, these were the first buildings for the most part, almost built. So they're all single garage, single driveways and multi-car units.
I have no objection to these rotations as long as we don't lose the street parking.
Right, same.
If you can figure out more street parking, great. If not,
Oh, that's actually 2 parking
There's
places.
actually 2 spaces there, so
okay, so 1 and 1?
if it's actually that length and we can fit 2 in front, we'll take 1 away from there and we'll gain
Okay.
Gain one where will you put the other one?
between the 2 new
houses?
driveways.
Yeah, between those.
Yeah, just shift it over.
Great, thank you.
So the same thing, this driveway.
So do we need to put that into the decision in some fashion or another?
Andrew is saying yes.
And the last issue is building 29. We don't have the building permit on and we don't have foundations in the ground yet. But as long as we were coming, we wanted to make sure. Again, the reason we wanted to just kick it a little bit further away from Johnson Woods Drive, our driveways are gonna come in off of the stub emergency access road that goes into the other street, I forget the name of it.
Circle.
I believe that's
It's
Couch.
Couch.
It's Kelch.
That's Couch.
Oh, okay, right, sorry.
And on the actual grading plan, you put that one up, Andrew. There's a transformer that's right very close to the front corner of that building on Johnson Woods Drive. So we were trying to get get away from this stuff with the corner being right there, so we're just pulling it back a little bit. So, and Ted actually bought this house that's adjacent to us, and we built that as part of Johnson Woods originally. It's off-site, but it was an old house that was kind of abandoned, so he bought it, tore it down, and put a new house there.
So you didn't split these at all? These are
No,
still?
this was original duplex, it's just
Duplex.
shifted down a little bit to get a little bit further away from Johnson Woods Drive and the transformer. And the driveways are on this dead end emergency access, so it's not, there's not a lot of traffic or anything. It's a little bit more consistent with the buildings across the street from setback.
Don't have any objections to that one.
I don't either.
I don't either. It's fine. And are there any abutters who object to this one? Anybody on the phone?
I am not seeing any hands raised at this moment.
Okay, in the decision, did you want to add anything about the parking space? 12 feet?
So we are on hold for the permit on the full building permit on this as they work through the plan submissions with building department and getting everything from our developer.
Yeah, I don't think that, I think we're talking about extending the existing off-street parking space, not trying to provide a new one 20 feet away. I thought we're moving that one back up the hill 4 feet.
No, Ted, what we're gonna do is there's 2 parking spaces now, the driveway's going into the parking space and taking one of them away, so.
No, I know, so Bill, so I think the driveway is impacting the parking space by 3 feet. So I think we just move we move the other end of the parking space 4 feet up the hill, and keep our 2 spaces there.
Yeah, if you showed a picture, I know exactly what he's talking about.
I think you're barely touching it, so we just move it up the hill, 4 feet.
The stairs are in the way.
No, he's talking about going the other way.
He's talking about going up towards the words that say right.
We just thought about moving it up here.
So that one, where the red car is, we're gonna eliminate 3 feet where the red car is and move 3 feet up the hill.
No, I don't think, Ted, I don't think that you wanna have the 2 parking spots there right at the end of the driveway. That's really not a good idea.
It's kind of counting on people to consistently park really well.
That long.
Right, and keep, right, the sight lines, like
Ted, I think
Can
the
we go
better.
back to that plan for a second?
Ted, I think the better solution is what we already agreed to with the board, was to put another parking space on the street between the 2 driveways. There's plenty of room in that area.
Well, but you're forgetting one thing. From that garage, from that driveway, we have to get into that entrance. We have to do 5 vertical feet to get in that entrance. And the way to do that is we need to put a little rock wall along the street to get the elevation up there. I've done this on 38, 37, 36, 35, 34. If we want to add another space, look at this plan, and up where it says SGC, there's plenty of room to put another space heading up on that little spot toward the circle. So go, now if you can see where I'm talking, right there. There's a lot more room there that's not going to affect anybody.
That's not close to the houses.
It's okay.
No, it's close to some of the houses.
Yeah.
But anyway, the other thing I wanted to say earlier is, if you look at this plan, the approved plan was illegal. That dotted line was not 20 feet off of the street. And it was not, I didn't think, if you look at the right-hand unit there, you look at where the dotted line was, that's 10 feet off the street, and we're required to have a 20-foot setback. So the approved plan would not have been in compliance with zoning.
Yeah, no one's objecting to the change in the building.
I know, yeah.
We're just trying to
So-
keep the parking.
There's gonna be an awful lot of driveway hot top if you go driveway, parking space, driveway. I think if you go up and Enos there, it's a lot friendlier place to put a parking spot. You're looking at it right now on that plan.
That's fine. Looks like you have space for more than one.
I was gonna say put two.
And the space now is a little bit small, we can make sure the one up the hill is, 25 feet long, so there's, it's big enough for a big car.
Sure. Like I said, as long as we don't lose parking on the street, that's fine.
Yeah,
We're not
I
having one or
agree,
two.
that's very important. Sorry to butt in, I didn't mean to be,
No, we
I should
appreciate
have been
it.
muted.
That's fine. We don't want to have to come back for moving a parking space.
I do see Mr. Tom Perry has his hand raised.
Yes, Tom?
Actually, Kelly Condon, 14 Green Meadow Drive, across from this newly proposed back up the hill parking space. Is it possible to move that parking space forward rather than backwards? So that you're not, if you push that space back, you're gonna go close up to the front of the building in front of our house and in front of Ken's house, which is right up against his wall. So is there a way to move that space rather than back, move it forward?
So Kelly, I'm not sure I know, the space that exists now, we're talking about leaving that where it is.
Right,
And then adding one going up to Enos.
Going up to,
Right, yeah, right there.
Around the corner.
There's no wall that doesn't affect anybody.
oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were I apologize, Ted, then, I thought it was, what you were describing was the double space,
Yeah, by Ken DeVidio. No, I'm talking, that one's gonna get a little shorter, so it's easier to park a car, and then we're talking about building another one around the corner. So we end up with more, not more spaces, but more space in the spaces.
oh, okay, so it's around the corner headed towards going up, like if you were gonna walk up through the walkway towards Enos?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you, Ted.
You're welcome, Kelly.
Thanks.
So that's 12A and 12B and 29. And there was a third, you said?
1, 12A, 12B, and 29.
Any other comments from the board?
No, are you just working on the language in that, Andrew, is that?
Yep.
I
We just heard from
I saw Lisa raised her hand now.
Who has?
Lisa?
Lisa?
Yes, hi. I just have a question about moving those parking spots up by Eno Circle. So that's actually, my house is right on the end there, and that's an access road, it has the gate, it's very narrow. And shouldn't that stay open that's an access road for emergency vehicles, and it's a narrow road already, I can't imagine how they're gonna put 2 parking spots there.
It's the same width as the rest of our roadways, and it's a bump out, so we make the road 4 feet wider where the parking spot is. So it's never affected people
So
parking.
you would go into where the grass is?
Yes, yes. We're not gonna make the road narrow, we're just gonna put a parking space and a bump out where the grass is.
Okay, so we'll just lose all that green area?
No,
That
no,
was
I gave it.
already lost. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we ready?
Ready?
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Could you call up the decision? I just had one point if I could.
It is what.
Down you talked about the requirements that are imposed. Right. It says, prior to the resale of any unit, Ted doesn't control a resale, so he doesn't necessarily know that a unit's been sold. So he can't put into their P&S, which is a private party not involving him, any kind of a plan. He doesn't control that. Other than that, I understand the requirement.
And the one area I highlighted was the previously approved setback from building 12A to building 11, because I don't think that 17.9 is right looking at the plans like you mentioned. John, I think, mentioned as well, so I'll get that correct number tomorrow.
We all set with the text?
Okay, well, I'll move to approve the minor amendment to the PUD special permit for Johnson Woods. That's it.
Name each of the properties.
Oh, sure, for building lots,
It's building numbers.
buildings numbers, buildings 12A/12B, and building 29.
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you very much for your time, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yes,
we'll follow up tomorrow.
Brad,
Yes, is attorney-client privilege?
I wanna say something to the board, thank them for their time. You might wanna let them know that we're hoping to come up with a slightly more workable envelope plan that will decrease their burden going forward.
Bless you.
Just, if we give you, a square of, a box like where the boxes are now that meets all the setback requirements, we'll always build within that box, then we don't have to worry about a 2-foot, perforation or 3-foot perforation. I'll work with Andrew and Julie and Bill, we'll get you something in a month or so and say, listen, here are the houses we have yet to go, here's the box, they meet all zoning requirements, setback requirements, and we'll fit inside the box, and if we don't, we'll come talk with you, but if we do, we won't bother you anymore. Would that be helpful?
That's okay, but I mean, the swing can't be 10 feet. If you're talking
No,
about.
it'll be, we'll take the current box and just round out the corners, round out the little bump outs we have, the 4-foot bump out or the 2-foot bump out.
I'm just.
So you can look at it, and if it works, great, if it doesn't work, we won't do it. But we'll get you something.
Think about it. I'm just concerned the butters won't,
We'll
react.
understand exactly where the buildings are going, yeah.
As long as it's clear.
Right. Yeah, we'll work on it.
We wouldn't want to be anything but that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Soldier on.
Yeah, so do you
At least for the,
guys want us to
at
bring
least for
these
the
kind of
updates,
changes
right?
to you in the
Yeah.
future? Like, I mean, we felt like we made a big error when we signed off on building 1 because we missed that it wasn't one that was already done, had already been discussed, and we were busy and just didn't give it the time that we should have given it. And then like,
need to
is
look
that
at
something
each
you
of
wanna
these.
see? Or if they're like meeting the setbacks for the PUD, and I mean, because sometimes what they change has like a great impact on an abutter, like we've seen.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
and
We
I-
need to see all of these.
And I kind of feel like we should know before abutters get upset about something that actually truly is built and we haven't had a look at it. Is
That's my experience so far with this.
Well, let's look at these three examples, right? So building one starts shifting towards residential on Enos, so that one should be looked at, because that was about a 10-foot change.
Yeah.
The two 12A and 12B where they just kind of rotated
Rotated.
parallel, there's minimal impact, and maybe that one doesn't, that kind of maybe doesn't get looked at.
That's where there was that impact of the parking spot, which was interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and frankly, when you look at the road now, you're like, you can put a lot more parking in, can't you? Put a lot more road parking in.
Yeah.
I do think that in this development in particular, because of the history, that it makes sense to bring this stuff here, even if we don't look all that.
Okay, like if
Interesting.
it's like less than a 5-foot change, like is there a threshold for which we could do it administratively?
If the, so bringing them here holds them to a certain standard, right? They have to get this stuff ready and done and submit it. If administratively you can still control that and it doesn't get out of hand, I don't know how many buildings are left.
50.
50 buildings left.
But we need to see them.
buildings left? 50 units, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
what happens is if you let 10 of those slide and then like there's a habit or something and all of a sudden
Right.
you lose track of it again.
It's a domino effect.
Yeah, so that's the only concern. We lost track of it for a few
Right,
years
it's
there.
very hard for us to track because the project's been going on for 18 years. And
Well, I think
it's
they're-
been
they're
6
probably trying to go
planners and
faster
some
just
stuff is
so-
electronic and some is hard copy and it's crazy. So we're trying to organize it better, but it's, and then the
Whatever
building
whatever
There
helps
is no
you.
master plan, unfortunately.
numbers and the street numbers and.
Talking about it. There's an approved site plan.
There's an approved PUDR.
Yeah. That's the
So-
master plan. I know the variations from it, but that's okay.
I mean, we could always do what we do with other things, where we send it to chair and vice chair and say, what do you think, should we bring this to CPDC or not? Like if it's like 5 feet and we're,
And everything looks still about the same.
yeah, and it's not like something that's immediately obvious will have a big impact on anybody.
But then the abutters won't know.
Right.
And that's a problem.
And then
That's been a recurring problem.
Well.
When a beloved tree is gone.
Well, I'm just trying to think about that building one today where, what was it, like 2 or 3 abutters thought it was closer.
Well, 'cause
dramatically
it-
closer,
you know.
I guess, yeah.
Visually it is.
Closer than what?
Closer than.
Well, right, the
Close.
closest, not closer than the closest approved point, but more of the
But more of
buildings
it, right.
is at that,
So I
you know,
mean, it
like-
seems like even though it takes time, it seems
you
like
build
there's a benefit to let people say what they thought it was going to be and for people to look at it and say, well, this actually looks like it's what it is.
It's really hard to understand scale from the plan, especially
Yeah.
for lay people, right? And, you put the foundation and you still don't have a wall. Once you frame that wall,
And people
Like,
are like,
oh,
holy
wow.
smokes.
and then you're like, oh wow, it's right there. Just like when you go inside, you're like, oh, it's not as big as I thought it was.
No, that was,
That's the way it works,
but
right?
yes, all the plans are public. Somebody asked in the chat if the plans are public. You are welcome to contact planning staff and we will guide you through what we got.
I should have mentioned before that we don't really like use of the chat during these
I
meetings,
know.
because these are open public meetings. And so the chat can run afoul of that.
So the next item we have is Form H, Chimney Hill. Or whatever they're calling themselves.
So
House Lane.
Where is that on here?
I don't see that.
It's not on the agenda.
It isn't?
None of the one I
It's in our packet.
No, it's not. It's,
The endorsement, this is from an email from Andrew. The endorsement of Form H covenant agreement for the 3-lot subdivision Sanborn Lane. You cite that.
you
So
did,
we do
it was
have
supposed to
a
be.
note at the bottom. This agenda has been prepared in advance and represents a listing of topics that the chair reasonably anticipates will be discussed at the meeting. However, the agenda does not necessarily include all matters which may be taken up at this meeting. Things like Form H's are very standard and usually fall under other business. They don't
Okay.
require a hearing. they don't require notification to anybody. So that's the information if you wanna do it tonight. If you don't, that's also fine.
This is the first time I've seen the Form H.
I think it's a good idea to take care of it.
Yeah.
I do.
I'm not fully following what Form H is, but I'll allow
It's the covenant agreement for a subdivision that governs the subdivision, right? And under that covenant, in addition to that covenant agreement, we often get a Form J. The the tri-party
Some
agreement,
form
right?
of surety,
Which is
yeah.
like the surety,
IJ
the
or
bond,
K.
right? And then they apply for lot releases from the covenant, like the covenant release the lots and.
So they can sell them.
No, we release them so they can get a building permit.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's usually after a certain amount of infrastructure and like utilities and road work is done, to a certain point. Yeah.
So if you want, a lot of the conditions prior to, all of the conditions prior to such have been met and they're looking forward to going with site work and building permits.
Maybe which subdivision this is again?
Chimney
Farmhouse
Hill,
Lanes
Farmhouse
and
Lane.
Woodland, yep.
So do we need to vote on this?
It would be a
And
vote to
endorse.
endorse, yeah.
Okay, so I move that we, is it, well,
And I would need
You do.
signatures.
are we ready? I'll move that we vote to endorse the Form H covenant agreement for Chimney Hill Real Estate LLC. Subdivision of land. I forget the
Sorry, what was your question?
I'm I'm kind of muddling
She's
my
making
way
the
through the
motion.
form to try to make a motion. I was looking for Farmhouse Lane. I'm looking for what we call this.
It's also known as Farmhouse Lane. Yep, that's the actual.
Okay, I
address.
move that we endorse the covenant agreement, Form H. I'm just gonna say, for the property known as Farmhouse.
Lane. Roadway known as.
Well,
That's-
has that been approved?
No, I don't think so.
I think
Let's
it's
say
best
for
to
the,
call it the 103 Sanborn Lane
right, the
subdivision.
3-lot subdivision at 103
Okay, that, I can see that.
So it's Sanborn Lane.
It's off of Sanborn Lane.
I'm gonna get this right here. I move that we endorse the covenant, Form H for the covenant agreement for the subdivision off of 103 Sanborn Lane.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Done.
You guys just need to actually endorse it.
Right, if I could get 3 signatures on this.
Single page or two?
I believe that's the only signature page.
Cause this is the notary.
It's this notary.
Yeah.
Good. It is nearly 11.
Sure, why not?
I didn't want to leave you out.
You have my minute notes.
I did, and I made them.
Good.
Thank you very much. I believe you had actually commented them on before.
Oh.
So you're good.
Bonus.
We're still catching up.
Okay.
So we have a few other things. An update on the open space and recreation plan from Heather. Recap of town meeting, which we could gladly skip that one.
Just make sure
Future
you all
zoning
remember the
amendments for
outcomes.
consideration, I'm still processing town meeting, so not really ready for that discussion yet, but. And then minutes.
And then what?
And minutes.
Okay, and I'll try to go through this quickly. This is a short version of a longer presentation that was made to the Conservation Commission, and we can scroll through this and probably even get through it much, even in a shorter fashion.
Do you wanna come sit over here, are you good?
But you can run.
I'm fine, I can read up from over here, so I guess I don't know if I was representing CPDC officially, but I was working with Julie and Andrew and others in the town to go through our approximately 7-year update of our open space and recreation plan. If you're not familiar with the open space and recreation plan, most or all communities have them. We have it for the good reasons of actually doing the planning for open space and recreation resources. It's also in Massachusetts a necessary thing to tap into state grants for funding, and I also happen to know it's a national requirement to tap into stateside land and water conservation fund dollars, of which we now have a whole lot more since the fund was made permanent and dedicated a couple of years ago through the passage of the Great American Outdoors Act. So there's a lot more money we can tap now, and you have to have an open space and recreation plan to do that. So briefly, this is where I'm going to skip through. There was a wonderful consultant from Horsley and Witten who worked with the town staff, the rec committee, the conservation commission, planning staff to go through, do a whole open space and recreation inventory of all the types of lands we have, assets we have, private conservation land, public lands, private, you could call it private conservation land, private open space, chapter 61 lands that the town probably wants to keep our eye on. This is just basically the northern half of the map. The next part is the southern half of the map. There was also a public process to do an analysis of need, what people wanted. So there were public surveys, I took out a whole bunch of the slides. Public surveys, workshops, we heard a lot of what people wanted. There are some resource protection needs for water quality, for wildlife corridors and habitat protection. We do have habitat here, we do have wildlife corridors, we do have actually natural hazards, flooding, so also looking at protecting and enhancing things for in the face of climate change. There's also some fun community needs. The types of things of recreation that people talked about were things like having a splash pad, a pool. People talked, much to my delight, about trails an awful lot. People talked about, and actually this is part of the survey, it was really interesting, a need that was identified was just improving the awareness of our conservation areas. It was not surprising, but kind of astounding how little people knew about the places you can go here. Continuing to build a walking and biking network, we have some good plans in place already, and then also focusing on targeted populations for accessibility. Youth and seniors, and in case you all didn't know, environmental justice is interesting for Reading right now. We for the I think it's for the first time, have an official census tract that is an environmental justice tract as defined by the income parameters for the state, and it's the area that is actually part of our downtown smart growth district, closest to the train tracks, then going over to the other side, kind of up over toward Parker, meets the income criteria. So then their management needs, upkeeping our existing areas, and then looking forward at new opportunities, like keeping our eye on chapter 61 properties where the town might have, does have the right of first refusal. Oh, and there was also some talk about pursuing CPA, which is the Community Preservation Act. I will note that there was, in the surveys, it seemed like there was strong support for pursuing the Community Preservation Act status. There was less support in taxing ourselves in order to protect conservation land. So there is that dichotomy to overcome. And there wasn't a lack of support. It was just like more than half wanted to tap CPA, less than half wanted to tax ourselves to do it. So I just remember that. Okay, and then so what does all this have to do with? Oh, and then going on, we already talked about some public outreach needs, getting into some regulatory and policy needs, and this is where it has more to do with CPDC, is not only connecting recreation open space with development projects, using development projects to do that, but using low impact development, nature-based solutions, green infrastructure, and some of our regulatory frameworks. And then of course considering the impact
impacts of climate change. So goals and framework, goals and objectives. There were 5 chunks, five major goals. I think we can go through a lot of these slides fairly quickly again. In the open space plan, the action matrix, and so there are actions under each one of these objectives, and the lead entity, the lead board, the lead department are all still being finalized, and I thought we could flag as we go along the areas that were flagged for CPDC. Which was not this objective 1, goal 1, and not goal 2, but you can read them and see these are all good things to do. We're going to build local capacity. This is also on a 7-year plan. A lot of our things were identified for year 1, 2, 3, and then kind of been somewhere like year 1 through 7, but as happens in action plans, we're gonna do it all right away, and then we'll see how it actually shakes out. So there's this one category. A lot of it has the Conservation Committee or the Recreation Committee or the Trails Committee as the lead. But let's move on to objective 2, because I actually only brought the notes for objective 3 on. Enhancing open space and passive recreation. A lot of this was again Conservation Committee, Trails Committee, and the Recreation Committee. And then when we get into goal 3, actually a lot of these were also very directly related to the Recreation Committee. Maybe there was an interesting one under objective 3C. There was real interest, I'll flag it for you all because it still is Recreation Committee, but there was some talk of CPD's expertise in this type of thing, of creating a master plan for the reuse of the former town wells and water treatment area in the town forest, but that's clearly not under our jurisdiction. It was just CPDC may have some planning expertise to lend there. Okay, let's move on to goal 4. Because this is where one of the overall goals was to create a connected network of accessible open space and recreational resources. In town, there are lots of places where we have open space, we have roads, we have sidewalks, and they're like these little connections through trees that you can make and probably connect things in a better way than, in a more cohesive way than we're able to do now. So within there are some objectives to explore, understand what those gaps are, explore ways to do it, maybe get a body that is not actually a regulatory body to make friends with landowners who might want to participate in making these connections. Roles for CPDC here are to propose or to establish local policy to identify opportunities in both commercial and residential development and redevelopment projects to build on the local and regional network, so keeping our eye on those places where we can make connections where gaps have been identified, so that would be year 2, year 3 down the line once those gaps have been identified. And then also to look for opportunities to add pocket parks and other small places in higher density residential areas when we have the opportunity to do that through project designs. Also in objective 4, I will say, is an action to review the planned residential development overlay district and the downtown smart growth district to ensure they're creating usable and functioning open space. I guess that relates to the other topic that we have on how town meeting went. And so then let's move on to objective 5. Because this is where there are a couple of actions. This is also where there are a couple of actions for CPDC, probably combined with the Conservation Committee. Under Objective 5A of using local land development policies and regulations to minimize impacts to natural resources, actions for several years are to update land development standards and regulations to encourage the use of low-impact development strategies, green infrastructure, and nature-based solutions to manage stormwater, as I mentioned. And there's another action to update local regulations to ensure future development and redevelopment projects are accounting for the impacts of climate change, such as looking at the floodplain overlay district, the wetlands bylaw, and the stormwater bylaw and regulations. And both of those actions are seen as areas where CPDC and the Conservation Committee would be the lead. And then there are several others under Objectives 5B and Objectives C that have to do with the DPW, the Conservation Commission, and town staff. in addition to the DPW. So that's cursory because it's late at night, but that's kind of the overview.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we have a letter that we are going to be asked to,
So it's a letter of support.
a letter of support.
Submitted to the state with the update, the plan update, and so if you wanna vote on whether to endorse this update and sign this letter, it just needs a signature from Pam, but that would be an action item you could do tonight if you wanted.
Yes.
So that's pretty ambitious.
It's 7
There's
years.
There's a,
And there's a
right,
lot that other people are, aside from us,
no, I guess that's really, I don't think it's ambitious for us, I think it's ambitious for those other organizations. I guess my question is, not knowing how much time those other organizations spend on other things. Right, we wouldn't have the capacity to take on a whole bunch of that. I guess what's gonna keep people on what's gonna keep those other committees sort of on task?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I guess I'm looking over at Julie as well, because then, I mean, there has been, and the portion that I didn't, a slide that I took out were the accomplishments over the last master plan. Somebody, I think, was keeping their eye on the ball, or a group of people were keeping their eye on the ball for what Reading said we were going to do the last time around.
Right, and so this slide is like the high level accomplishments since the plan was since the 2013 version of the plan. And so, you know, I think like many of the action items, maybe not like the CPDC ones about regulations and policies, which we can kind of try to take on in-house. But many of the other things like could be tied to funding or would need funding to accomplish, right? And so having an updated open space plan allows you to apply for the grants to then do those projects, you know? So, and I know the Conservation Commission had the full enchilada presentation from Krista from Horsley Witten and went through it, and they're providing feedback and comments, and I'm sure they'll be tracking this. And the Trails Committee also has a lot of action items. So it is ambitious, but I think that the 2013 plan was ambitious as well, and a lot of things were able to happen over that like it's I guess a 9-year period, but make no small plans.
Yeah, and I think about it just even in there's both my time in Reading and then my time in Reading where I was actually paying attention to some things. And you look at the list of what's been done, and you look at the strength of our Trails Committee, which didn't even exist when I first moved to Reading. And I'm just thinking, like, just even through my professional world, where I've seen applications before I was volunteering in Cpdc, where I saw really good applications coming in from Reading for things like recreational improvements. And my sense is that having an action plan and going through the process of deciding what the priorities are, and this is what I saw in just even talking with the conservation agent or the recreation department as we were going through this, is the deliberation that goes into thinking about, okay, what are our priorities, really does provide a guidepost for where will the town seek funding, for what projects will the town seek funding as those opportunities emerge, and the opportunities are pretty constant.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because like the rec director was very involved in this plan and like thinking ahead about what the recreation needs are and what should be like, so it's kind of like a capital plan in some ways, right? It's just we need the capital piece of it.
Yeah.
So.
That's a good question though.
And so right, there's someone, I guess where I was thinking is, you know, is it revisited? Is there a, once a year or once every 2 years, right? Sort of like get the band back together and go over where things are, or is that really done by staff, recreation staff and whoever's, supporting the Conservation Commission, that you have those goals in keeping it out in front, because it's a board, right? I'll say, right, you don't necessarily,
Right, you look at the
right, you look
agenda
at what's
every time,
what's in front of
look
you.
at the agenda.
You don't often have that time to go back and look at the third or fourth, the tertiary plans that you have, like how often do we look at the housing production plan? Maybe really,
This fall.
yes, that'll be front and center, but like in the past, we haven't, right?
Right.
So I guess that's really,
Yeah, I think like that's
is there a
good
way to make sure that this keeps out in front?
Right.
Or is it just sort of baked into the way that those other boys do things?
I think it's pretty baked into the way they do things, but also there are a number of action items where staff are like heavily involved in taking the lead on them too. So it's not just like relying on volunteers who have packed agendas to like figure out how to get this stuff done.
Just more curious.
Yeah, great questions.
Embedded in that is, you
Well,
hate to see it.
7 years
you
later,
hate to
it's nice
see-
to look back
right,
and see
you-
that we did these
Embedded
things.
in that comment is, you hate to see a good plan just go sit on a shelf,
Yes.
right? Cause there's obviously a lot of effort put into that, so. That never happens.
And I will say, I mean, this is, somebody, I could pass it on to the Conservation Commission, the Trails Committee, but that pot of money, the Land and Water Conservation Fund stateside grants, can be used for trails also. Not that trails are everything here, but I think a lot of people don't realize they can be used for that. So where I see the trail in there, I remember talk of the Trails Committee not having enough resources. There's money there that wants to be used, so you can tap that for trails, not just land protection and not just parks and ball fields.
Adding that to the minutes.
You need a climbing wall in Reading?
So I guess do you want me to make a motion to
Endorse the letter of support.
endorse the letter of support
Endorse the
to the Division
Open
of
Space and
Conservation
Rec
Services?
plan update.
Okay.
I'll
Endorse,
second that.
yeah.
Is there a second?
Yeah, second.
All in favor?
Okay, great, and so Pam, if you could just sign that.
You get my signature block and everything.
Okay. Does anybody,
Voila.
thank you, does anybody want a recap of like the high level changes that were made to the 40R bylaw at town meeting, or is everybody like more or less aware of what happened? Cause I have created a document, it's not the official certified article from the town clerk, but it's like a document that kind of shows, I could just go to the big ones.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
cause I did lose track there.
Can you?
Right,
Of
there's
15 amendments, I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
and actually, there were 15 amendments, and I think, like 4 passed?
Oh, more than that.
More than that, there was like one night nothing passed, one night everything
Right,
passed.
yeah.
Did you watch it?
No, once you advised me on it, I kind of read up on it.
Did you watch it?
I did.
Both nights?
Well,
So I put it
I was also,
Oh, I was sick.
yeah, so like, what else do I have going on?
We actually talked to a couple
Yeah.
people like that.
Yeah.
It was like 2 different nights.
Yeah.
Show it to the amendments, yeah.
And actually literally, I mean, a lot of people were sick, I will add this, and so this is anecdotal from, I mean, when I was looking out there, like the first night I was like, oh, half the people aren't here, they must be sick. And the 3 nights later, I was like, oh, the other half, those people are here now, the other half of the people I knew were now out sick, yeah.
So
What's sick?
COVID.
It's just COVID thing.
It's this COVID thing. I don't know how I managed to escape it.
I learned the hard way not to ever do a staff amendment and then also not to try to amend that amendment on the fly. So never doing that again.
Oh, that's right, that turned out more complicated than
Have we
thought it
finished
would.
all of
And
them?
then what got focused on was like not the point. Whatever. Isn't that always the way? I need to screen share this, don't I? Andrew, where's my screen share? So I'll just scroll down, again, this is not the certified article, very important for me to say that since in case the town clerk is watching. This is just, I did a compare docs and I ended up with the changes. Let me just, so not a lot of, no changes to the definitions. Do you have a mouse? It's really annoying. In the dimensional table, within the total minimum setback, it now adds inclusive of a 15-foot setback when directly abutting a lot containing a single family, 2-family, or 3-family dwelling, either within or outside the district. So what happens if there's a property abutting single, 2, or 3 on 3 sides?
Yeah, that was not contemplated
Not
as
sure.
a compelling argument.
Could be more than a 30-foot setback total.
No.
Anyway. That's that one. Parking, and sorry for the different formatting, but I was trying to piece it together. So parking got changed, so studio and 1-bedroom units would stay at the 1.25 spaces per unit that you have currently. 2-bedroom units would be a 1.5 space per unit, and then any residential units greater than 2 bedrooms would require 2 spaces per unit. Oh, this changed as well, sorry I didn't highlight it. Retail or restaurant, now there's a flat requirement for 2 spaces for retail or restaurant, where it was 0 before. So how that works, if that retail or restaurant is within 300 feet of a municipal lot, also not sure. So, TBD. Alright, this is the staff amendment we're not gonna talk about. And the number of compact spaces allowed in a parking garage went from 25% to 15%.
Okay.
There is a requirement for a landscaping plan showing mostly native species. So that's within like the open space design section.
That's still subject to the tree warden's approval.
Yeah, so anything on the town-owned land would be, yeah. Affordable got accepted at the lower threshold. And then, so there's typically the housing marketing, it should be marketing, but it got put in as market, so anyway. Housing marketing and selection plan is provided as part of the like affordable fair housing marketing plan. And the town is allowed to make a case for local preference for these projects so that the pool of candidates in the housing lottery matches or represents the diversity that we have here in town. And it actually includes people who live in town, whose kids go to school in town, who work in town. It's like there's like 4 different categories. And so we always write this, and DHCD will approve up to 70%. We always like make the case for up to 70%, and they actually don't know to what degree they accept that or not. I would have to go back and look and see what they've done, what's actually been approved by them, I'm not sure. But we always make the case for the most. And so this is just saying we would always make the case for the most. So, pretty much in line with what we do. And, I haven't gotten to the waivers part yet, have I?
Can I just want to make sure that I understood you right. That's not only for people that live in town, but local preference includes people who work.
Yep, work in town, their kids go to school in town, so it could be like Metco families. There were 4 things, I forget what the 4th category is.
So it doesn't just set the diversity that we have
No, it's
in
like,
place right now.
no. Right, yeah, I didn't explain that very well.
There was, it's an interesting place because there definitely was debate about that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Steering ourselves to less diverse than we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not, because it is more than just who lives here, it's more than that, but it matches kind of the population coming in and out, and involved in Reading in some fashion, I guess. Under your design objectives for granting waivers, there was a in the sixth one about deeper, broader affordability, there was discussion of the affordable units being comparable in size, location, accessibility, and amenities and utilities to other units in the development. That's currently a requirement of DHCD, and this language is directly from DHCD. So in line with what's already happening. And then a seventh criteria was added that that you would put value on the installation and implementation of green infrastructure or other innovative nature-based solutions or methods for stormwater management. Now for the density waivers, there weren't a lot of changes made to this. The big one though is that the density cap was reduced to 50 units an acre, down from 65. And there was one other thing I thought. Oh yeah, the same language about affordable units was added in down here. That's all. Yeah, that's all.
And then 50 was that one of the ones that was further reduced and then rejected?
It was the first night it was proposed and did not pass, and then it was brought back slightly differently.
It was
second night.
The first night it was proposed at 55, and that was defeated.
And then the second night it was brought back at 60.
And the second night it was brought back at 50.
No, 60. And 60.
It was brought back at 60,
And then it got
and
reduced to
people
50.
clearly had time to think and digest information that was correct or not. And it was, that was amended to reduce it down to 50.
I'm just surprised at the way that town meeting is managed, that you can just keep coming back, right? I mean, it was clearly the same, it was put up as an amendment, voted on, defeated, and then the next night, like, let's vote on the same thing again. I'm just surprised that.
Well, and I'm you know.
Well,
in
right, there was nuanced differences there, but in total, right, it was the same question voted on two different times.
Yeah, it's
I'm
like
just
it
surprised
went
that,
from
right,
55 to
like-
60. I thought, well, that's not a reconsideration, but then it was dropped down to 50. I'm surprised that wasn't.
It's just,
And
you know,
parking also was considered the first night, and that was defeated.
And it was slightly different
And
the
a
second night.
slightly different.
Yeah.
I'm
Slightly
just
different amendment.
I'm just
the next night.
surprised that you can do that. I mean, for anything,
There was a
right?
little
Like-
deja vu going on.
like,
Yeah.
you do multiple nights and you have like 10 different whacks
To
at the
the
same
end, when
thing.
people are tired, you wait to the end, right? You bring the
Yeah.
question back at the end.
Yes.
They're tired, they're just voting to get out.
Yep.
It was a little bit of everything.
I mean, it's up to my understanding is it's up to the moderator at the end of the day. If they're different enough in his opinion, he can allow them, so. He or she, I should say. So that's that, and
So I'm gonna say that, you know, there's a lot of talk, but in the end, right, there's some key things there that changed on the floor, but not, I wrote down four things that really will have impact.
Right. Yeah.
Those four things are substantive, very substantive, but
What, the tier?
setback,
the setback,
parking,
The
reduced
parking.
compact spaces and density, yeah.
There was a lot of debate about parking. Debate is the wrong word. There were a lot of comments around parking.
So we shall see, it'll be interesting to see what we get. And then going forward for zoning, I'll prepare something for your next meeting about like some ideas, some things you've talked about before. And we can start to figure out what to queue up for an upcoming town meeting. Not November, because it's too late for November, but I mean, like, could make November work, but that'd be crazy, I think, at this point, to start contemplating something and be done, have a hearing in 2 months. Yeah. Also kind of burnt out. So.
I guess I would be interested in moving the housing production plan along and seeing what that may change priorities.
Right, and yeah, so I'm working on the scope, we have funding, we'll be hiring a consultant to help us. It'll be a more robust process than we did in 2018. Because 2018 was like we did a pretty big process in 2013. And then 2018 was an interim. We knew there would be new census data coming and we would need to revise it more holistically. So we did like a kind of interim update. We used a consultant, but it was not as much process, I guess, as like, you might do. And now we're gonna do a bigger process and we'll be doing it this fall. So I have to put together what that's gonna look like. So stay tuned.
Are we done? We're done in? No?
It's up to you guys. I'd love for you to get the minutes off the agenda, but that's just me. Yeah, that's fine.
Yep.
Is that a no?
That's a big no.
I think we're adjourned.
Okay.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Right.